T-minus 10, 9, 8,
The clock is
7.
operating. We're underway.
Tranquility Base here.
Endeavor, go at throttle up.
Okay, good afternoon. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Mike Ryan. I'm the Chief of Media Services for NASA. Appreciate you all coming out today. As you can see, the test site here, along with many other facilities here, has felt the effects of Francis. That's why it's a little hot. The compressor that has the air conditioning on that side of the building, and from here out, I don't have power. But I'm very glad to be joined today by our Center Director, Mr. Jim Kennedy, with KSC, and from the 45th Space Wing, Brigadier General Select Mark Owen. And at this time, I'll turn it over. They'll each have an opening statement, and then I'll direct the questions. Mr. Kennedy.
Okay. Thank you, Mike, and good afternoon to all of you. Thank you for your continuing interest and support in what we're going through at the Kennedy Space Center. You can't hear me? Are the mics hot?
Yes.
Okay. Well, again, welcome to all of you. Thank you for joining us at the Kennedy Space Center. We take an awful lot of pride in the interest that you show in our work and our people, and we sincerely appreciate that. I think we are very fortunate to have had the limited damage that we've experienced from Hurricane Francis. There was a time a week ago when some of us worried about the future of human spaceflight, at least with the potential of a loss of orbiter vehicles or the loss of International Space Station hardware. I'm proud to tell you that although we have some minor issues with hardware, the hardware being processed for the shuttle and the station is secure and in good shape. As I told you yesterday, and I'd like to reiterate the point today, that the most important thing to us was the safety and security of our workforce. We have some 14,000 employees. To our knowledge, not the first person was harmed in any way physically by the storm. So we feel very fortunate for that. I'll go into the details in a moment, but we have made the decision just an hour ago that for reasons which I will amplify later, we are not going to declare the center fully open for business until as early as next Monday. We anticipate a ramp-up of the workforce on the days between now and Monday, but the center will be fully open as early as next Monday. Our space shuttles are safe and have experienced no damage. We have a minor purge issue with Discovery, but it is not a showstopper. We can live with this. The backup power was shut down in the OPFs because we had to abandon the site. They were dependent upon primary power. The primary power sustained in OPF 1. It did not in OPF 2 and 3, so they lost their power and their purge for a day or two. This is not a concern to the people in the shuttle. They have been there before. They know what it takes to make that hardware flight-worthy, and we'll be all about doing that over the coming months. Our VAB was not so lucky, as you probably saw as you drove in. We have approximately 820. Yesterday I told you it was 1,000. Today it's a more precise number, is 820. I also need to correct the size. We told you yesterday everything's preliminary. The size, instead of 10 by 4, like I said yesterday, is actually 16 by 4. And there's one I can show you over at the LCC if you'd like to see a real live panel sitting on the ground. So we think about 20% of those 820 panels represent a through hole to the VAB, if you will, a window, an open window to the VAB. That concerns us a lot, but the facilities engineering people today don't think that between now and the possible arrival of Ivan as early as next Saturday, there is anything they can do to plug those holes, if you will. So we will probably be, for the next period of time, including Ivan if she comes ashore, sitting there with an open window to the world in the VAB. The roof of the VAB is also of great concern. We had some 30 people that were deployed to the roof of the VAB today. They were there for just a short period of time and decided they needed to get off of that roof. It was very insecure, if you will. It was soggy, it was weak, and they did not want to run the risk of falling through the roof of the VAB. So we have called off the workforce on the VAB. Don't know an awful lot about what it's going to take to fix the roof of the VAB, but we'll certainly be looking at that hard over the coming days and weeks. The two external tanks in the VAB are in good shape. There are two aft skirts in the VAB, and there are three forward assemblies in the VAB, both of which used for the solid rocket booster, which would be built for the Discovery flight. All of that hardware in the VAB appears to have survived the storm in good shape. Two shuttle facilities were hit hard. Our shuttle TPS facility, the TPS-F, was hit hard. It makes the thermal protection system tiles and blankets, and that facility has what I would estimate about 25% of its roof ripped off. This is very critical to any kind of a schedule that we might hope to achieve on shuttle. The tile production, the TPS production was on a critical path. We are looking at alternative places to do that work. You may recall that some of that work used to be done in Palmdale, California. We don't know if there's any capability left out there in terms of equipment, tools, etc., but we're looking into that as well as Houston, Texas. So that one's got us concerned that the TPS facility is in bad state of repair. Just north of OPF Bays 1 and 2 is the Process Control Center, the PCC. It processes shuttle software, and it's the hub of our email and web system for the entire Launch Complex 39 area. It lost the majority of its roof and took severe water damage as well. The third floor of that three-story building is loaded with computer equipment. The surprising news to me, as a part of preparation for a storm coming at us, is to cover that computer hardware with polyethylene sheeting. They did that, and they believe that the computer systems are dry and will be useful. They have not yet been checked out, however. So International Space Station hardware is fine. What a positive statement to be able to tell you today. The Space Station Processing Facility never even lost power. Yesterday we were told that it flickered off and on. I thought I understood yesterday it actually went to backup power for a while. Never lost primary power in the SSPF. An awful lot of International Space Station hardware is in the high bay, as I'm sure most of you have seen, and there is no concern with any of that hardware. On the Launch Services Program side of our house, the ELV, the SWIFT spacecraft, which is our next satellite to fly, does not appear to have suffered any damage. It's in the high bay of Building AE across the river. Just to give some belts and suspenders, the SWIFT spacecraft was put inside its shipping canister in case the building was to leak, gave it an extra set of protection. And although they have not yet gotten inside the shipping canister and checked out the hardware, they do not want to declare 100% certainty that the vehicle's fine, but they did today declare a 90% certainty. They are very comfortable that that hardware experienced no damages. In general facilities, along with what we've already talked about, we have many facilities that appear to be good from the outside, but indeed have damage. The press site's a good example, as it has a hole in its roof. I had the privilege of flying in one of our helicopters today across the entire center, and I can tell you, while it is so much better than what we thought it might have been, the truth of the matter is many, many buildings have siding and roofing damage, water leaking situations, and there's going to be an awful lot of work to repair the damage that's been done. Relative to Ivan, I think we have better news that it may now go south of us. The models, if you have seen the latest weather reports, show it going as far north as the Kennedy Space Center, Central Florida kind of a thing, but the band of error also goes south, well south of the Keys. But today's report from John Madura, our weatherman, says that they fully expect it to go south of Florida and then curve back up into the Gulf and possibly take a path similar to what Charlie had. Obviously, we all hope that's not the case, but that certainly is something that's possible. The visitor center, operated by Delaware North, although it took some damage, we hope that it is going to be open for the public use tomorrow. The one limitation that we have is that we will not allow the bus tours to come to Kennedy Space Center. And so they will be operational at the VC, but will not be bringing the bus tours here for some of their typical stops. In the helicopter ride, I had not heard anything about this until I saw it firsthand, but the Saturn V complex has serious roofing damage. I would say, I'm just guessing here, but I would say 25 or 30% of the roof of the Saturn V complex looked to have been ripped off. So more to come. We have not yet sent the first DART team inside the Saturn V complex, so we haven't assessed the damage. That's, as you might understand, that's low on the priority in terms of where we deploy our forces. But that's a beautiful facility paid entirely with the contributions of our visitors to this center, and we certainly hope the best for that. I guess I'd like to say just one closing word about the workforce situation. The infrastructure, not only at the center, but in our community across Brevard County and beyond, is in a very tenuous situation right now. As you all know, the roads are not the best. The traffic lights are not the best. The schools are shut down. Many of us don't have power. You probably know those numbers better than I do, but I'm one of the ones who doesn't have power. Life is going to be difficult for many of us as we get through the coming weeks, because there is so much work to be done on this center, and the DART teams are doing that. The disaster response teams are the ones that are doing that. Just to give you a ballpark number, we have 500 people formally appointed to a DART team. They augment that team as needed, and today those 500 people augmented their capability with another 500 people. As they get out and see a situation that says, I need these skills at this facility, they call those people in. So today we have about 1,000 people out here. Our plan for returning the workforce to the workplace is to look for Monday as a point in time at which we can be fully back up and running. In the meantime, between now and next Monday, we will augment the DART team with more and more people each day, depending upon the needs. So it's 1,000 a day. I suspect by the end of the week, it'll be several thousands of people doing various functions to get the center back up and running. So with that, I think that concludes my comments, and I'm proud to tell you that I have been working with General Select Mark Owen by phone for the last what, Mark, 3 weeks?
That's, well, about that much.
He-
I think I've been here more than 2.
He has gone through baptism by fire, to say the least, but I will tell you, it's been a great relationship already. We take pride in having a spaceport, which includes both Mark's side of the river and our side of the river. We have worked closely for the last several weeks and look forward to many more weeks. And with that, General Select Mark Owen will tell you about things across the river.
Thank you, Jim. Appreciate it. I'd also like to add my welcome to you. Many of you I haven't met yet, and I'm looking forward to working with you as well. Much like Kennedy Space Center and the director's comments, we thank you for your interest and your support of the many fine people that are working at the 45th Space Wing and its facilities at Patrick, the Cape, and down in the other centers, the sites that we have along the coast. First of all, I'd like to also emphasize that we have had plans in place to do hurricanes, and we pulled those plans out. We exercise them periodically. In this particular case, we had to do more than exercise. We actually had to execute and implement them, and it's that exercising and training that we did really paid off in this particular case. We were able to prepare for the hurricane. We were able to evacuate in an orderly fashion. To date, we've had no injuries, no loss of life for any of our fine personnel as well. And so that is also something that's of primary importance to us, is a highly skilled and technical workforce, and their families is paramount of concern for us. So we're happy to report that everybody's accounted for, everybody's safe, and they're eager to get back to their homes and eager to get back to help be part of the community in restoring our normal way of life again. We also took some significant hits as far as structural wind and water damage, not unlike many of you along the coastal communities did, and we are in the process of assessing that. I will talk first about the mission. That's what we are asked to assess first, and that is at the Cape Canaveral. And in Cape, we can split that up into 2 parts and pieces. One is the operation of the Eastern Range and its facilities and assets that do that, and the other thing is support a launch campaign. As you know, we've got 3 boosters on pads. We have the Titan 4, the Slick 40, or Space Launch Complex 40, the Delta 4 Heavy, that's on pad 37, and of course the Delta 2 Space Launch Complex, the Delta 2 at Space Launch Complex 17. All the boosters in those pads appear to be fine. The preliminary assessment. Likewise, I'll caveat everything and say this is all preliminary information too. But the point being is that for those in the gantries, they seem to be initial inspection, both the pads, the facilities there, as well as the boosters. They seem to have survived and weathered it just fine. Now the devil's in the details. We're going to get down and do some more assessments. And we also had a GPS satellite in one of the processing facilities. It was likewise placed in its storage and shipping container, and it was under gaseous nitrogen purge to keep it in a nice, safe environment. And even though we did lose electricity, it did not exceed any of its parameters, such as temperature and humidity. So at least now we haven't opened that shipping container, but all the indicators that we use to measure the health and status of a satellite indicate that GPS satellite's just fine. We did take some damage to the Delta checkout and maintenance facility. I guess it's the Delta maintenance and checkout facility, in which we have 2 boosters in there. They're Delta boosters, one in support of NASA's Deep Impact mission, and also there's another booster in there for our follow-on GPS mission. And the north side door in that particular case was ripped off in the high winds, and they were exposed for some period of time to the elements. Now both boosters are, and I'll use the term shrink wrapped. There's a technical term for additional protection that we have, kind of a plastic coating that we do put around the boosters, and so there is an additional protection there. However, initial inspection seems that everything's okay, but again, likewise, we have an obligation to go in and do some more inspections. So that's pretty much the bigger chunks on the launch campaign side. Looks like we've dodged a pretty significant bullet there. It seems like everything's going okay. On the range side, it has a little bit different character. We have gone around and inspected all of the instrumentation sites, and aside from some facilities issues, again, tiles blowing off, some concrete blown off the buildings, and so forth. The instrumentation itself seems sound. But I'll use a metaphor kind of like your stereo system. You pick up a component and it looks pretty good to you, and as far as weather and wind damage, but really the proof of the pudding is when you actually put the stereo system together and you try the tuner and you try the CD player, and that's much like the way it is with range instrumentation. Until you bring the range up and then you test all the different instrumentation out, do you really get a picture of whether the range has been affected in a very bad way. And so that's to be determined. We have our what we call hurricane response teams. They're much akin and in composition and conduct like the DART teams that NASA puts together, of which, by the way, we're partners in that as well. So we have hurricane response teams. They have been busy yesterday and today, starting very much with the preliminary inspections and then moving on to the more detailed inspections to try to understand the impacts that the Hurricane Francis has had on us. So, in the meantime, we're cleaning up and also taking care of our people because we have we're responsible at Patrick Air Force Base for the care and feeding of some 10,886 people who come to work every day, and that's to include military, civilian, and contractors. It's particularly the military families that we have an obligation to take care of. We have about 550 homes on Patrick base proper, as well as another 500 down in South Housing and Satellite Beach. And those families want to come back, and they're very anxious to come back. So as a result, we are moving ahead with a very fast-paced campaign to just make sure that debris is out of the way and rudimentary safety, for that is power, sewage, potable water, and so forth, are in good order. And we'll be welcoming our population back at 4 o'clock this afternoon. So I'll be issuing an all clear. I want to make it clear to you that it means that we're going to be welcoming our families back to Brevard County, because keep in mind we've been keeping them out, and they're getting quite anxious to come back and see what their houses are looking like. So it's important to them, and it's important to me likewise to get them back as quickly as possible, yet as safely as possible, because I have an obligation to make sure that the buildings are safe and nothing happens to the folks when they return. So we're going to do that at 4 o'clock. The families are going to come back. We need some of our population to participate in the reconstitution and recovery, so we have asked them to report around to duty on Thursday, and that way we can then move a little bit more of our recovery and reconstruction actions down there. But it is going to be a while until we're up for normal operations too. Now, as far as, again, the instrumentation goes, and as far as the launch activity goes, we are, in military terms, full mission capable. Everything that we've been given care of, we can make it work and get it through, and as near as we can tell. But the full detailed assessment is in the details, and it's going to take a couple of weeks to do that. And we don't know what the impacts are to our launch schedule yet. We don't know what the impacts are as far as cost goes. We're keeping good cost accounting. But again, the most important thing to us right now is the people. The people now are on their way. We'll be on their way back this afternoon, and we'll get them back. We plan on restoring services on the base as early as Friday, but probably no earlier than Friday, with a lot of the services being delayed until next week. And then after that, we'll be helping the community, our community partners up and down the coast get ready and clean up and return to normal life. So just like on Patrick Air Force Base, just like you, we have extensive water and wind damage. Our signage is down. Our stoplights are down. There's a lot of ceiling tiles that are just really moist and heavy laden. There's siding blown off. I think some of you joined us today and saw some of the damage that we have on the base. Again, not uncharacteristic like you're facing in your homes. We do have electricity in most of all of our facilities that we found so far. We have electricity, but not of all our air conditioning is up. And we do have potable water, but those are the basics to bring folks back. So once again, looks like we dodged a pretty big bullet. Francis did come along. Excuse me. Francis did come along and punch us in the nose. But we're Americans and we're Floridians, and we just get right back up and get on with business. And we're going to be back up and operating as quick as we can, and we're going to be there as community partners to make sure that everybody does too.
Okay, thank you, sirs. What we're going to do here is today we don't have a microphone, so I need you to speak up. Please, so raise your hands when I call on you. Please identify yourself, your organization, and who you want the question to go to. I'll give you a question and a quick follow-up. No A, B, C, D, E, please. Okay? So we'll start right here with Marcia.
Marcia, then Associated Press. Jim. Does this more or less squash the return to site plan for March or April? There's a lot of work that needs to be done. And what's your best feeling?
Yeah, Marcia, I'm not going to estimate when we might return to flight. It's very much to be determined. The impact that the facility damage will have on our ability to return to flight. We'll be working with the shuttle program people over the coming weeks to help assess that. So if you don't mind, I'm going to pass on that question.
Go ahead.
Well, what about the two pads?
Yeah, two pads look real good. Thank you for mentioning that. I forgot to say that. As far as we know, as we came over here, they were in the process of powering up both 39A and B. And you won't know specifics until we get power up complete. But the assessment at our 12 o'clock telecon was that the pads survived beautifully. I will add to that we plan on having a 12 o'clock telecon every day across the breadth of the KSC stakeholders, which includes our contractors, as well as our civil service and our friends at the 45th. So every day we're going to be comparing notes, understanding progress made in the last 24 hours, and Mike will help us get that word out to all of those interested in our progress.
Peter?
Thanks, Mike. Peter, CBS News Radio. And with the change in the dimensions and the amount of panels that were gone, what is the total square footage or estimated square footage of the VAB damage?
Yeah, I would say 820. Have you got a calculator? It's 820
I'm not good at
times 16 times 4. Divided by the square root of pi. So 820 by 16 by 4 would be the way you get to that total square footage. A related question that I know I'm curious about is the amount of that square footage that is a window, if you will, a window to the world. I'm just guessing here, as Mark said, most of this is preliminary. We estimated on our helicopter ride that maybe 25% of the total appears to be a through hole, if you will, nothing behind where that panel was missing. So you could take those three numbers and multiply, divide it by 4, and that might be the amount of square footage of a through hole.
And a follow-up. It was my understanding that these buildings, they were built 40 years ago, were built to withstand 125-mile-an-hour winds. Yesterday, I think you mentioned that you thought the highest gusts might have been in the 70s or 80s.
No, 90s.
90s, okay, but still, that's well below what the limits were to be. Any comments?
Well, I would say the buildings are still standing. I think when they quote 125-mile-an-hour winds, they're talking about the ability of the building to remain erect after the passing of the winds. I think it's pretty fortunate that we only have some panel damage and some roof damage.
Mark? Correll?
Mark Correll from Houston Chronicle. Regarding the VAB, what do you need to do in terms of having structural engineers come in and even look if this building will be safe to work in down the line, or do you have no doubt about that at this point? I guess I'm just trying to gauge what your concern about the future of the building is and what you need to do to see if it can be repaired or it has to be replaced.
Yeah, the building is somewhat priceless to us as the processing of the shuttles depend upon the VAB. I have no question that the VAB can be rebuilt to where it will safely and securely process shuttle hardware. The big unknown is what will it take to make the VAB safe and secure again. The roof is of great concern. I think putting panels on is one category of concern. Putting a new roof on is another category. But we will rebuild the VAB to where it is safe and capable of processing hardware again. There's no question in my mind.
Yep.
You mean restore, or are you talking about starting?
No. You could take all of the DOD budget and we couldn't afford to rebuild the VAB. No, just restore the part that's damaged. Yeah.
Okay. Bill?
Bill Harwood, CBS News for Jim. you mentioned guys don't want to walk on the roof. I mean, I assume the corollary is you don't want people working under the roof.
Amen.
You mentioned that in Marcia's question, you don't want to address return to flight, and I can understand that with things being preliminary. But obviously, even if you're fully staffed on Monday, you aren't working normally in the VAB.
No.
There's going to be some time there. Can you just address what you have to have in place before you can work normally?
Yeah, they're in the process. That's a good question. Thank you. They're in the process now of netting internal to the VAB so that any debris that might fall off the roof structure or one of the panels structures that was damaged would be caught rather than fall and impact the employees. The ability, when I say that we hope to have all employees back on Monday, the three exceptions that we may still be dealing with Monday would be the VAB, the PCC, and the TPS facility. Between those three facilities, we have about 800 employees. Whether or not they're able Monday to go back to one of those three facilities is debatable. VAB, by the way, is 300 of those. We have, on a given workday, we have about 300 employees who work in the VAB. Our goal will be to make the facility safe enough for them to return to work so they can continue to do the work they do. But that also is TBD.
And a follow-up for me, the tile facility, could you maybe give us a little more detail on what they do in support of RTF, why that's in the critical path, and why that's an issue?
Yeah, they literally make the well, it's tiles and blankets, but they literally make the tiles from scratch in our TPS facility. Pour the material, mix it, dry it, cure it, cut it, form it, shape it, and put it on the vehicle. So that is very much in the critical path of getting the vehicles equipped with tile to support launch.
Okay, Chris?
Another question for Jim on the tile facility. Can you talk about any more specifics in terms of damage? Where there's ancient sewing machines, they have to sew the blankets. Was that floor severely damaged? Or?
Chris, that's a question that I wish, if I had kept better notes, I could answer that question, but I don't recall. I'll just take an action if you don't mind. I'll get you an answer to that. We did have some specifics of the couple of rooms that they were basically wiped out, but the exact processing that goes on in those rooms, I can't recall.
And can you talk at all about what might happen if you move tile production facilities to California for a while, as far as workers are concerned?
I wouldn't want to hazard a guess. I don't know. I know that we worked hard to get ourselves out of California, and what we left behind, I don't know. I doubt if we left the GSE, the equipment necessary to process the TPS. I suspect it's all here, but what we would have to send back, I don't know for sure.
I know that they've been making some for testing purposes tiles there, but I was wondering about the workers here. They're going to be out of a job.
Yeah, I know. The workers here are going to be in bigger demand than ever as they attempt to help us recover. Because now we not only have the work in front of us to process vehicles, but we have the work in front of us to get ourselves ready to process vehicles. So the workforce is more secure than ever, I would say.
And just so everybody knows, after that new telecon each day, George and I specifically, and as our staff comes back, will be ramping up to get those peel the onion type details, and we'll be getting around to you. Right now, we're just at the 50,000 foot level. Stefan.
Stefan for the New York Times for Jim. You said you have great concerns for the roof valve, for the roof of the VAB. Right. And I was wondering why you said it is unsecure and soggy. I mean, is there a danger of falling through? What is...
That's the way I took that comment when they said that they pulled their people off the roof because they were walking on soggy surface, I think is the terms they used. I think it's concern about falling through.
Is it made of what? Concrete? I don't mean to be flippant. What is it?
I don't know.
I have to get you that detail specifically. I'll just have to get it to you. Okay.
Are you keeping notes of the actions we're taking? We don't want to promise actions and never deliver.
Stephen Young with SpaceFlightNow.com. Of the three facilities that have been damaged, what would you say is the one that is causing you the most concern for return to flight?
I'd say, could I have two? The VAB and the TPS facility. The other facility, the fact that they were able to protect the computer systems on the third floor was remarkable. They also have a design in that building that I found interesting that we just learned about today, and that is that in the event the third floor was to take a fire alarm and the fire sprinklers come on, the building is designed with the ability of that water to flow into pipes that will take it not to the second floor, but divert it off and shed it outside. So I think that building is, while we have not yet seen the first and second floor, they had only seen the third floor, that building, I believe, will cause us less concern than TPS, primary path, as well as the VAB.
Wondering about the panels on the VAB, whether you took any collateral damage from those falling and whether they pretty much fell at the base of the VAB or did they travel in the high end? Yeah, that's an interesting question as well. There were a number of vehicles that were parked outside, and I don't remember any specific numbers, but I think we lost the windshields on many of the vehicles. And I heard that was more than likely from the panels that were flying around like shrapnel. How far they might have gone, or are they all pretty much at the base of the VAB?
It would be a guess if I answered that.
Our guard team will give us those specifics. In the back?
Television in Houston. Can you talk a little bit about the work that's not being done today? I mean, for people who are unfamiliar with what was going on in the VAB, I mean, what should those people be doing if not for Francis?
Well, since we're not operational today, I can say everything that would have been done at KSC is not being done. Is that what you're doing?
I mean, what work are you doing inside the VAB? What's not being done? What's being delayed as you look towards this pretty tight calendar getting back in this day?
Yeah, I'm not really sure how to go about addressing that question. The VAB work is in preparation for processing the vehicles. If we were to sustain a March delivery date, then we would be rolling an orbiter over in the December timeframe. I think orbiter rollout was December or January. Orbiter rollout would be January. So the work going on in the VAB is getting the MLPs and the facilities ready for the rollover of the orbiter. A part of that is the stacking of the solid rocket segments, starting with the aft skirt, the motors, and that forward assembly that I mentioned, mating of an external tank. The external tank has a due date here of November 3rd, is the latest date I recall. And that's the kind of work going on in the VAB. All of the vertical erection of the shuttle assembly is what goes on in there. That's what will possibly be impacted by our inability to continue to work in the VAB.
Anybody haven't called on yet?
Oh, okay. Give you a quick yes or no. The Columbia debris.
Can you identify yourself?
Oh, sure. Rory O'Neill with Metro Networks. The Columbia debris is inside the VAB. Was that breached in any way? The debris from Columbia?
No, I know what you're talking about. I asked the question yesterday, but we didn't have an answer, and I did not think to ask the question again today. We're all concerned about that. That's quite a tribute to the Columbia crew on the 16th floor of the A Tower, and haven't heard, but I'll make it a point to find out before the day's over.
Follow up on okay. Anybody else haven't called on yet? Right here, man? Do you have a question? Okay. Anybody in the back? Right here.
Was the OPS damaged in any way on the exterior? Was there any water leak?
It wasn't apparent. The only water intrusion that any of the OPS had was underneath the doors. And that was just, as I understand it, just a matter of mopping up the water. I don't think there was any overhead water, no concern for water. I heard that our deputy Woodrow Whitlow has a question, but I'm not sure that we're going to answer.
Okay.
Oh, he has an answer. In that case, Dr. Woodrow Whitlow.
we lost about 52,480 square feet of panels.
Thank you.
If you didn't know, he's an MIT grad, so he probably did it okay.
Therefore, take that number with great concern.
All right, looks like we've gone through once. Anybody have a second time around? Bill?
Yeah, this is with the tile, so the only question I had about the tile facility. And again, I think I know the answers, but for my readers, I'd like to hear from you. Mm-hmm. On the tile facility, I mean, most people see the orbiter in the bay and the tile's all on there. So right. What is so critical about the tile facility in return to flight?
Yeah, I think just because a tile is on there today, Bill, doesn't mean that it's a tile that the vehicles will fly with. I think they have additional tiles to manufacture and to install. And the blankets are something that are constantly being finalized for flight. So I think that's probably where your answer is.
Okay, Peter?
The other facility that was badly damaged is the PCC.
Yeah.
Can you explain again the same?
I sure can. I have the same question myself. Processing Control Center is what that stands for. It's primarily dealing with IT, launch processing systems, software development, software checkout. It's an IT infrastructure facility. Offices on first and second floor, computer systems on the third floor.
Okay, before I get to you, Mark, I know Nancy. Nancy, did you have a question before? Sorry. Okay, Mark.
For General Owen, the statement you sort of made about the facility being ready confused me a little bit because you haven't finished your assessments and when you could launch. Is there any way, and I don't live in the area, so that's why my question's a little rambling, but what was sort of on deck for you to launch, and what will your priority be in terms of missions to get ready? Because I presume some are military, some are science, and some are commercial. Do you have a strategy for that sort of determination?
Sorry if I was confusing. That's a good question, and probably deserves clarification. For example, one of the things I'm accountable for is operating airfields and having access here for not only our customers, but also as a national asset on the eastern seaboard to be able to respond and receive, if you will, air traffic. So that was our first priority yesterday, for example, is get the airfield up and operating. And we were able to do that, save for one radar that has a sheared drive motor, and that's something that we have the ability to address and fix. So in that regard, we are fully mission capable as far as airfields go. We have a skid strip also up here on the Cape. We're assessing that right now, but for the most part, it looks like we're going to be able to receive air traffic there as well. But that's even more specific for the customers here when they bring in launch and satellite hardware. And so far, we've received everything we're going to receive in that regard. So that's probably what I say. We're mission ready in one aspect, but you're absolutely right. When it comes out onto the pads, the first inspection there on the pads gives you a good sense that nothing significant, no major setbacks are in our future as far as the gantries, the support equipment, that which the commodities that we store. There's been no great breaches in vessels and so forth. Yes, there's some other buildings on the Cape that you'll see that you will see if we get a chance that have suffered some of the same damage you see when you come up A1A, and those are support structures, and we can probably work around those. But when it comes to the range, that's where it starts to become a little bit more problematic. You can do a lot of facilities inspections. You can check a lot of antennas. You can look at a lot of towers and give yourself a nice sense of comfort. But until you start powering it up and start running data across the lines, that's when we're going to run. That's where we're going to either run into problems or exonerate those systems. Likewise, we do the same thing with computer rooms. We're checking computer rooms out. We're taking off the bags that and the waterproofing that we've put on them. Things are looking optimistic, and so in some areas we've already, and part of our mission that we're responsible for, we've already tested it. We received aircraft. We took in a NOAA aircraft. We took in a FEMA aircraft. FEMA already has a presence on Patrick Air Force Base. The Rapid Needs Assessment team is already up and operating. And in that regard, we're up for business. In our launch campaign, things look good. We haven't seen anything that looks like it's going to have a major launch impact. Range TBD. Beg your pardon?
How many pads do you have?
Pads. Yes, I know. I'm just I'm trying to do a quick calculation on my head, and I don't have an MIT scientist here to help me out. But the point is that you can name them all. There's some that are active and some that are and some that are not.
What a show off.
We have 36 A and B for Atlas, 17 A and B for Delta II. We have the Titan 40 complex, 41 for Delta 4 and Atlas 5 and 37 for Delta 4, and then the 2 shuttle pads. That's right. The last one, you're right. The last launch took it out, so there's only one at 36.
That's right. That shows you the great partnership between NASA.
Yeah.
We
have time about 3 more. Okay, Stefano?
Yes. What about the Air Force museums in Owen?
the Air Force Museum is one of our treasured assets as well, and we have not yet gone in and assessed that completely. But that is something that we're very concerned with when we went into it. We hardened that facility as much as we could because there's a lot of one-of-a-kind assets in there. We were very concerned about that, and I have, at this point, I've asked about it, and I asked about it and haven't got an answer back on that, but we can take that for action. I have not been apprised, nor have I made it out there yet.
Okay. Right behind.
Brad Lester from Reuters for Jim. In terms of repairs to the VAB, does it make any difference that you don't really know whether that's going to be in use after the end of the decade now? I mean, would it make a difference if you knew that you were repairing it for 6 years or 20 years or whatever?
I would say it doesn't. For one thing, we don't know if we'll use our building for 6 years or 20 years. You know, the jury's still out on the launch vehicles that will be selected to get us to Moon, Mars, and beyond, and it very well could be utilization of Launch Complex 39, if it's a shuttle-derived vehicle in particular.
Okay. We'll end the day with Marcia, but before I do that, hang around for a minute because I got a couple admin things and tell you about the tour afterwards before you all scramble up. So go ahead, Marcia.
I'm just wondering what are some of the initial ideas being floated around to repair the exterior of the VAB where the windows are? Are you already trying to fabricate panels of the same size? And also, how are those panels attached?
Yeah, Marcia, you're one geograph deeper than I am on this subject, so I can't answer that. I will say, I think I mentioned earlier, but the structural engineers don't think there's a temporary fix that can be done in the short term for those panels. So does that say we go straight to a permanent fix? I got to believe the permanent fix is more 4x16 panels, since the structure that they secure to is 4x16. In fact, I wanted to make one of my closing comments to tell you that if you drive by the VAB, and I guess your bus will on the way out of here, it'll help you appreciate the size of that structure. To look, you can see the grid behind the missing panels. You can see a 4x16 piece, and it looks like it might be 2x8 kind of a thing. But the immense size of that building makes a 4x16 panel just look minuscule as you look at it.
I'll get that for you, Marcia. Okay.
Sorry. I would have one more close. Oh, Mark, go ahead.
No, and I'd like to do the same, so go ahead.
Okay, well, I'll make this. This may not interest the media at all, but it's profoundly important to me, and since I've got the hot mic, I'll share it with you. One of the things that we're really proud of at NASA is this core value that we call the NASA family. And I just want you to know, and I encourage you to report on this if you're so inclined, that the NASA family is alive and well. We have had phone calls from every sister center wanting to know if they can send people, if they can send any equipment, if they can send money to support their friends at the Kennedy Space Center. And I've got to tell you, that really touches me to know that it's not just KSC and this by themselves. We have 9 other centers, including Jet Propulsion Lab. We have headquarters. 2 of our congressmen have already been down here. Well, one's been on site. Congressman Weldon was here today. Heard from Bill Nelson yesterday. I know Tom Feeney wants to come. We have support from Congress. We have support from our local community. It is so comforting to know that when you go through a crisis, you're not in it alone. You have the rest of the family to support you. And I just wanted to say that. So, thank you.
General?
I was just going to add that I get this high sign over here that there's no rockets down. There's no assets on the ground at the museum. So I wanted to offer that to you as a follow-up from my Cape lead over there. And at risk of coattailing, well, I am coattailing. It's the same idea here as the United States Air Forces. Congressman Weldon gave me a call this morning as well, offered his well wishes and his support for what we have going on at Patrick. And certainly we felt as much a part of the community here through this adversity. Our families live with your families right across the street, so we're understanding what it's all about. And they're going to come back to work here and get busy and get us back up on our feet. So thanks a lot again for your interest and your time. Appreciate it.
In Francis's wake, devastating flooding and damage.
It's engulfed the entire state. 57 of our 67 counties have been impacted by loss of power alone. So what we're doing is working our way through restoration.
More than 3 million people remain without power.
The massive number of outages that we have will have us probably working for up to 2 weeks to restore electricity.
70,000 people are still staying in nearly 300 shelters. Officials are urging those residents not to return home until they are told it is safe.
We know that it's antsy, that you're nervous, you want to get back and see your property, but clearly it's important for us to be able to keep the roads open and clear so that our emergency workers will have an opportunity to go out there and do their job.
Those emergency workers and National Guardsmen are bringing in food, water, and medical supplies. Governor Jeb Bush traveled to several counties, visiting emergency operation centers, shelters, and damaged areas. Early estimates place the cost of Hurricane Francis between $2 to $10 billion in insured losses. Uninsured damage could be just as high.
The estimates are just going to be through the roof, if there is a roof out there for it to go through, because there's just been so much water and wind associated with this storm, and it's been moving so slowly that I'm very concerned about getting into the middle part of the state, into the rural areas where the flooding is going to be an incredible hazard.
The brand new marina in Fort Pierce is a total loss. One resident was devastated when he saw the damage.
I feel really bad for our neighbors. There were a fair amount of liveaboards here, and from what I understand, some of them simply had the minimal liability coverage, and basically they're out of a place to live right now.
Kitty Pilgrim, CNN, reporting.
Let's get a check now of the international weather forecast and a look at the next hurricane out in the Atlantic Ocean. For more, let's go to Femi Oke over at the Weather Centre. Femi.
Hello there, Zane. I don't know about you, but I certainly got dressed in the dark this morning. That's all because of the remnants of Francis. If you head back here 24 hours, I'm going to rewind the storm. Here we go. At the beginning of the weather loop, you can see as it gradually makes landfall, then pushes up through that southern section of Georgia. As it does so, bringing copious amounts of rainfall with it. Let me show you the radar summary. The radar basically sends out a pulse. It bounces off the precipitation, in this case a lot of rain, and it bounces back. And then we actually make a colour differential as to how heavy the rain is. So once you start to see those very vivid colours, that indicates, I should go around that way really, everybody in meteorological land is being really mad with me. That's the circulation of what's left of Francis. And Atlanta and the CNN Centre is about here. And that's when we lost power. That rainfall will continue to move up through that eastern seaboard. A lot of rain coming up for the rest of this week. You'll see that big orange blob here indicating about 60 millimetres of rain in every hour. That's a tremendous amount of rainfall pushing right the way up that eastern seaboard there. So by the end of this week, should be seeing Francis getting out of the way, but during the week working its way up further up towards the northeast. Let me give you some temperatures then as we look around the rest of the US. Dallas at 28, San Fran at 29. In fact, central and western parts of the US looking pretty good. The rain is all scattered across through towards the east. New York coming in at 24 degrees in Celsius. So we head across through the Caribbean, spits and spots of rain and showers, but I actually want to point out to you where our new hurricane is. This is Hurricane Ivan, right now affecting parts of the Caribbean. I'll give you its track. This one takes us slightly on a more southerly track than the track that Francis took last week. Category 3 right now, so the wind speed's gusting up to 222 kilometres an hour. The categories in Atlantic hurricanes just tell us how strong the winds are. But by Friday, it looks like it's heading right in towards Jamaica. It will have even higher wind speeds and will be a very large hurricane indeed, or that at least is the prediction. Areas to watch out for, areas where you need to take care, all the way through that southern section of the Caribbean Sea. I want to take you now across through the intertropical convergence zone. That's that area here where you see all those scattered thunderstorms and showers. That's where a lot of our typhoons or our hurricanes come from. And they're heading up through into that southern section of Japan. That's still where we have a typhoon to cope with, now gradually moving through the Sea of Japan. I'll show you its movement there. Still a typhoon and heading further up towards the north. So keeping an eye on that as well. That's a look at your global weather forecast. Now back to Zane.
Your range is 10 miles now, sir. It's coming down through 200,000 feet.
10 miles, 200,000 feet, thank you.
10 miles from vertical flight, and it's through 200,000 feet.
Copy.
manager, MCC, we are able to identify a tumbling object.
Copy.
And mission manager, MTC, be advised, from our vantage point, we do not see a drogue chute, negative drogue.
Copy.
Vertigo Mach, the track bears 2009 miles, sir.
Thank you for Vertigo.
Vertigo Mach, it looks like we have a no shoot, sir. Vector 200,
Mission
put it on your nose,
manager,
8 miles, look for an impact.
MTC, negative drogue, negative chute.
Copy, we see the visual.
Impact at 5855 past the hour. Impacted vehicle on the surface.
Carrying solar particles back to Earth has crash-landed in the desert in the U.S. state of Utah. NASA says the parachute that was meant to slow the Genesis capsule's descent didn't open. The refrigerator-sized capsule cracked open on impact. Now, in a news conference some time ago, NASA officials said they have several things to consider before they can determine whether they can recover any useful information from the capsule. People in southwestern China have begun cleaning up after 6 days of floods that have claimed more than 170 lives. Emergency workers and soldiers are searching for scores more from the flooding. Authorities say hundreds of thousands of people were evacuated and more than 300,000 homes were damaged. A spokesman for the Disaster Relief Office in Sichuan said another 10,000 people were sick or injured. Meteorologists are forecasting that 3 more major storms will strike China in coming weeks. 9 deaths are being attributed to Hurricane Ivan on the island of Grenada. That's according to the news agency AP. The Category 4 storm struck thousands of people on various islands in the Caribbean, including Trinidad and St. Lucia, where these pictures are actually from. 90% of homes on Grenada suffered damage, according to the island's Prime Minister. The hurricane is threatening to cross right over Jamaica by Friday morning, where the forecasters believe it will eventually reach the United States, which is still, of course, recovering from being hit by Hurricanes Francis and Charlie. So what are the prospects? Well, let's find out. Let's get you a global weather forecast. Fritz Nevos is at CNN's International Weather Center, and he's got the details from there. Fritz.
Hello there, Becky. We'll take a close look at Hurricane Ivan. You can see it here, our satellite view from NOAA. And this is a very compact, very powerful hurricane, Category 4, as we mentioned before. Winds over 210 kilometers per hour. And that system will continue to track across the Caribbean Sea and will be affecting the part of the Lesser Antilles. In fact, there are warnings, hurricane warnings in effect for Aruba, for much of the Netherlands, Antilles, and that will continue. Also, we do have hurricane watch in effect for northern areas of Venezuela and also into Colombia, and hurricane watches have been issued for the southern parts of Hispaniola as well. So that system will continue to push across the area over the next few days. We're going to be watching that for you, and will be remaining as a Category 4 according to our forecast. So far, that's what it shows, and you can see that it is moving across the area, being very close to Jamaica by Friday and continuing on its westerly track across parts of Cuba. And then it's too early to tell if it's going to go more to the north into the Gulf of Mexico and affect Florida once again. We know they don't need it, or continue on a more easterly track. So we'll keep you informed, of course. Here's the latest that we have on that system, the latest track probabilities. So on both sides of that track, this is what we expect that system to do. And you can see by Friday continuing to push across the southern parts of the larger Antilles, and will continuing also into that area, but remaining pretty strong.
Der Aufwand war gigantisch. Da hat sich die kleine Weltraumsonde mit Namen Genesis auf einen Weg von 30 Millionen Kilometern gemacht. 3 Jahre sauste sie durchs All, um dann weniger als 20 Mikrogramm winzigster Partikel zusammenzusammeln, Partikel von Sonnenwind. 260 Millionen Dollar hat der ganze Weltraumspaß gekostet, was die Raumfahrtbehörde NASA aber absolut vertretbar findet, weil sie sich über diese Kleinstpartikel Großerkenntnisse über den Ursprung und die Entwicklung unseres Sonnensystems erhofft. Aber was war, wird erstmal nichts mit Ursprungserkenntnissen, denn die Kapsel mit der Sonde rauschte ungebremst und ungespitzt in den Wüstensand von Utah. Dabei war die Landung Hollywood-artig vorbereitet worden. Heribert Roth.
Gut 1000 Meter über der Wüste von Utah, 2 Stuntman-Piloten aus Hollywood angeheuert von der US-Raumfahrtbehörde. Ihr Job sind spektakuläre Verfolgungsjagden. Heute sollen sie eine Raumsonde einfangen. Kurz vor 18 Uhr mitteleuropäischer Zeit taucht die Kapsel auf, mit wertvollem Sonnenstaub an Bord. Bange Momente für die NASA, ohne Happy End. Der Fallschirm öffnet sich nicht, die 260 Millionen Dollar teure NASA-Mission in den Sand gesetzt. Wir müssen jetzt erst einmal alle Daten auswerten, um herauszufinden, warum sich der Fallschirm nicht geöffnet hat. Aus den Fehlern können wir für künftige Missionen lernen. Dabei hatte alles so gut angefangen, mit einem Bilderbuchstart im Sommer 2001. 3 Jahre hatte die Raumsonde im All verbracht und mehr als 30 Millionen Kilometer zurückgelegt. Auf ihrer langen Reise fing sie mit ihren beweglichen Kollektoren winzigste Partikel Sonnenstaub ein. Die Erwartungen waren groß. Zum ersten Mal sollte Material von außerhalb der Mondumlaufbahn gesammelt und zur Erde gebracht werden. Die Weltraumforscher erhofften sich Hinweise auf den Ursprung und die Entstehung des Sonnensystems. Es ist eine herbe Enttäuschung. Ich bin im Kopf immer wieder die einzelnen Schritte durchgegangen und alles hat bis heute gut funktioniert. Aber es kann immer etwas Unvorhergesehenes passieren. Alles ging gut, bis auf die letzten Meter. So hatte es sich die NASA gewünscht. Der Fallschirm öffnet sich und die Piloten aus Hollywood nehmen die Sonde ins Schlepptau, damit die wertvolle Fracht sanft zur Erde gleitet. Dutzende Male wurde das in der Wüste von Utah trainiert. Das unrühmliche Ende: NASA-Experten stehen vor der beschädigten Kapsel. In den nächsten Stunden soll sie geborgen werden. Die Wissenschaftler hoffen, dass doch noch ein bisschen Sonnenstaub die Bruchlandung überlebt hat.
Die ersten Landungen in der Geschichte der Raumfahrt werden sollen, doch die NASA-Raumsonde Genesis mit wissenschaftlich wertvollem Sonnenstaub an Bord ist in der Wüste von Utah zerschellt. Die Bremsfallschirme der Raumkapsel hatten sich nicht geöffnet. Aber die NASA hat noch Hoffnung, dass die Probe den Absturz in der Wüste unbeschadet überstanden hat.
Spannende Minuten kurz nach 10 Uhr Ortszeit in der Wüste von Utah. Mehrere Dutzend Mal war die Aktion geprobt worden. Doch der Fallschirm, der die Kapsel sanft Richtung Erde bringen soll, öffnet sich nicht. Die Kapsel rast zu Boden und zerschellt. Eine technische Panne, mit der die Wissenschaftler nicht gerechnet hatten. Bei den Probeläufen war noch alles gut gegangen. Der Pilot eines Helikopters fing die Kapsel mit einem Haken auf, während sie mit einem Fallschirm Richtung Erde schwebte. Hätte der erste Hubschrauber keinen Erfolg gehabt, wäre ein zweiter zum Einsatz gekommen. Ein Stuntman aus den Filmstudios von Hollywood wurde von der Weltraumbehörde NASA extra für dieses heikle Manöver verpflichtet. In der Kapsel befinden sich zwar nur wenige Milligramm Sonnenpartikel, doch die Sonde Genesis legte dafür rund 32.000 Kilometer zurück und brauchte 3 Jahre, um sie zu sammeln. Die kleinen Staubteile verfingen sich nach und nach in ihren Kollektoren. Die Idee von Genesis ist es, Material von der Sonnenoberfläche zu bekommen, das 4,5 Milliarden Jahre alt ist. Zu dieser Zeit entstand alle feste Materie in unserem Sonnensystem, auch die, aus der wir geschaffen sind. Die Forscher wollten so Erkenntnisse über die Entstehung unseres Sonnensystems sammeln. Es ist der wohl wertvollste Staub der Welt. Seine Gewinnung kostete 260 Millionen Dollar. Doch noch ist der Traum der Wissenschaftler nicht endgültig geplatzt. Die NASA zeigte sich vorsichtig optimistisch über das mögliche Ausmaß der Schäden und die Brauchbarkeit der Proben.
An der ETH heute kurz vor 6 Uhr. Die Forschergruppe schaut sich auf einer improvisierten Leinwand per Direktübertragung die Landung ihrer Sonde an. Diese soll in wenigen Minuten mit einer außerirdischen Ladung an Bord in einer amerikanischen Wüste landen. Dort stehen Hubschrauber der NASA bereit, an Bord Hollywood-Stuntmen, die die Sonde samt Bremsfallschirm in der Luft abfangen sollen. Seit 10 Jahren arbeiten die Schweizer Forscher an diesem Projekt. Jetzt, so nah am Ziel, ist die Stimmung locker. Dann der Schreckmoment. Der Bremsfallschirm der Sonde öffnet sich nicht. Wie ein Meteorit trudelt die Genesis Richtung Erde und schlägt ein. Professor Wieler, Leiter der Schweizer Mission, hört von seinen amerikanischen Kollegen die ersten Details.
Was bedeutet das jetzt für das Projekt? Keine Ahnung im Moment. Also, wir sind mal optimistisch, dass es für uns, die sich für die Edelgas interessieren, sicher die grosse Verunreinigung, die es jetzt da wird geben von diesen Targets, nicht allzu dramatisch ist. Für andere Teile des Projekts, für die Leute, die sich für andere Elemente interessieren, also ist es vermutlich schlimm, aber ich kann natürlich nicht sehr viel sagen im Moment.
3 Jahre lang sammelte Genesis im Weltall außerirdisches Material. Und wenn Wieler mit seinem Optimismus recht hat, landet trotz Bruchlandung ein Teil dieses Materials in Zürich, am ETH-Institut für Isotopenbiologie. Dort wird es in den nächsten Jahren untersucht.
Das übergeordnete Ziel ist, dass man mit den grundlegenden Daten, die die Genesis-Mission liefern sollte, die Entstehung des Sonnensystems besser versteht. Sprich, die Entstehung der Bausteine der Planeten, das sind Meteoriten oder Asteroiden, und letztlich auch die Entstehung der Planeten selber und auch die Entstehung der Sonne selber.
Dafür sammelte Genesis Sonnenwindpartikel. Das sind kleinste Teilchen, die von der Sonne seit der Bildung des Sonnensystems abgestoßen werden, und das mit der unvorstellbaren Geschwindigkeit von 400 bis 600 Kilometern pro Sekunde.
Man nimmt im Prinzip ein Material wie eine Aluminiumfolie oder jetzt im Fall von Genesis teilweise auch ein bisschen kompliziertere Materialien und hebt das in Sonnenwind rein. Das ist ein passiver Kollektor und dann muss man einfach warten und am Schluss holt man es wieder runter. Das ist natürlich nicht so einfach, wie es tönt, aber das grundlegende Prinzip ist sehr einfach.
Am Schluss war es dann aber doch nicht so einfach. 264 Millionen Dollar hat die gesamte Mission gekostet. Und bis zur Stunde weiß die NASA nicht, wieso es zum Absturz kam. Trotzdem, die Schweizer Forscher sind immer noch zuversichtlich.
Mal noch optimistisch bleiben. Trotzdem eine Flasche Champagner aufmachen. Es ist immerhin gelandet, oder? Ich meine.
Ob die wissenschaftlichen Experimente mit dem Sonnenstaub zerstört sind, wird erst in den nächsten Tagen und Wochen feststehen.
Through in this area, this cage accumulated fiberglass, and that probably actually worked to our benefit. When we came in here yesterday, you basically couldn't see anything in here. All of the fiberglass was accumulated in a big pile. And I think actually that might have served to protect some of the stuff back here. You couldn't stand where I was standing. It was all piled up in this corner. And what we have in here is essentially spare parts for most of the equipment downstairs. All of those agency peculiar machines downstairs, waterproofing ovens, the high temperature processing equipment, the heat clean ovens, the Ludox processing, PGME processing. All of the equipment and spare parts is in this area, so we're trying to pull this stuff out of here too. But again, the big problem is going to be we spent years getting it organized, so we knew exactly where every O-ring, washer, valve rebuild kit, heating elements, ceramic tube, thermocouple, we knew exactly where all of that stuff was, and now it's just in a big pile.
We're going to take them short, yeah, they want to see that.
The high crew people who work well, yeah. That's just the title. They can depend on the job. 99% time it is USA, but if it was an SBS job, they provide their own they've got there's quite a bit of other like that. That's platform today, 93.
The Bluebird specimen in the building where we can see the damage.
Yeah, that took a lot of damage. Has anybody been inside? I haven't been out there yesterday. If they hadn't been inside to tell us the damage. To replace the whole, including the substructure below? No, not to replace.
Mit seiner ganzen Kraft hat Hurrikan Ivan die Karibikinsel Grenada verwüstet. Kein Haus entlang der Küste hat ihn überstanden. Fast der ganze Inselstaat ist zerstört. Die Regierung hat den Notstand ausgerufen. Jetzt warnt sie auch vor Plünderungen. Die Menschen laufen ziellos herum und das ist ein großes Problem für die Sicherheit hier und auch für die Hilfsorganisationen, die versuchen, wieder etwas Normalität zu schaffen. Zahlreiche Tote gab es auch, als Ivan über Trinidad und Venezuela hinwegfegte. In der Dominikanischen Republik wurden 4 Kinder und Jugendliche von meterhohen Flutwellen ins Meer gerissen. Keiner hat überlebt. Jetzt zieht der Hurrikan weiter seine tödliche Spur durch die Karibik und bedroht Jamaika mit Geschwindigkeiten von bis zu 230 Stundenkilometer. Der Flughafen der Hauptstadt Kingston wurde bereits geschlossen. Die Menschen sichern ihre Häuser, Tausende sind auf der Flucht. Voller Panik decken sie sich ein mit Lebensmitteln, Wasser, Batterien und Taschenlampen. In vielen Supermärkten wurde die Versorgung bereits knapp.
I saw the Weather Channel today and
vor Hurrikan Charlie habe ich keine Vorbereitungen getroffen, aber jetzt muss ich es tun, denn Ivan ist ein Monster. Noch im Lauf des Tages soll das Monster mit voller Wucht die Hauptstadt Kingston treffen. Die Inselbewohner rechnen mit der schlimmsten Naturkatastrophe seit 50 Jahren.
Zu dem Hurrikan, es vergeht ja keinen Tag, wo nicht neue Schlagzeilen kommen. Im Moment hat er 230 Kilometer in der Stunde um dieses Zentrum herum. Und der nächste Zielort wird Jamaika sein. Wir schauen uns das mal an hier. Er zieht ja selbst mit relativ geringer Geschwindigkeit, die im Moment bei etwa 20 Kilometer in der Stunde liegt. Und diese starken Böen, die treten eben rundherum um das Zentrum auf. Er soll also am Montag dann auch Kuba erreichen und am Dienstag auch Florida, wobei man schon sagen muss, dass sich diese Zugbahn doch noch ändern kann in den nächsten Tagen. Aber wir halten Sie darüber auf dem Laufenden. Das war es jetzt vom Wetter. Ich wünsche Ihnen noch einen schönen Abend.
It's blamed for at least 25 deaths in the eastern Caribbean. 17 occurred in Grenada, which sustained catastrophic damage. Authorities there have imposed a dusk-to-dawn curfew in order to prevent looting. The British Royal Navy was among the first to come to the aid of Grenada. Captain Bill Butcher of the Royal Fleet Auxiliary Wave Ruler. It's a supply ship that accompanies the HMS Richmond. He joins us now on the line. First of all, perhaps you could give us an indication where exactly you're accompanying the HMS Richmond to.
At the moment, we're on passage from Grenada towards Jamaica and the Cayman Islands.
Obviously, security a great concern in Grenada, where you've just left. Perhaps you can give us an account of what you've been hearing was going on the island.
We first put our party ashore on the Tuesday afternoon to render assistance to the hospital, and we'd been there for about an hour, and we started hearing a couple of gunshots, and threatening gestures were made towards my crew. So we withdrew the crew back to the ship that afternoon. But when we went ashore again on the Tuesday morning, things were much calmer, and people seemed to be getting around to accept the fact that, you know, they had a lot of devastation and were beginning to accept the fact.
All right, we're looking, as you're speaking with us, to images of utter devastation, houses literally flattened by the hurricane as it was passing through. What sort of assistance were you able to render once you, as you say, were accepted and your help accepted?
Our primary objective was to restore power to the hospital, which we achieved. We managed to get their air conditioning units and their chiller units working again, and their emergency generator. We then had medical teams who assisted the hard-pressed medical staff at the island's hospital, dealing with over 170 minor casualties, mainly with nasty cuts and treading on glass and things like that. We also managed to send a party out to clear the runway to allow planes to land, and we did concentrate on trying to get some of the island's communications back online again.
Obviously, a point of concern, you talked about how you were fired upon when your crew initially arrived on land. What is the security situation now? Because we hear reports that there has been almost rampant looting throughout the capital, that in fact the country has requested neighboring countries to send military assistance to help them deal with that part of the devastation.
We didn't really see that much of that. We hear that the Barbadian Defence Force arrived on, and they've the curfew's been put in place during the night. We believe things were a lot calmer when we left there early this morning.
Keeping in mind that authorities have requested assistance, how much response have they received to that?
I think it's just a little early. A lot of the French came down in a helicopter and they landed on our ship, and they've been doing a reconnaissance of the island. And I think now the world is beginning to wake up to a massive disaster that's happened in Grenada, and it's going to take a lot of effort from all the rest of the world to put that island back together again.
One can only imagine how difficult it would be to get around the island to provide the aid that no doubt will be desperately needed. Can you tell us anything at all about what authorities have been able to do, not just when it comes to the provision of shelter and water and food, etc., but simply getting around on the ground to see what has happened?
They certainly utilised Richmond's helicopter, and they were flying sorties around the island observing the damage. And as we left, you could see cars moving around the roads again, and four-wheel drive vehicles. I think most of the roads are open now and accessible, and the island's beginning to come back to life again.
All right, Bill Butcher, the captain of the RFA Wave Ruler, thank you very much for giving us that update. Certainly a very grave situation on Grenada, which of course saw 7 people at least being, or rather 17 people being killed by the Hurricane Ivan. That at this point making its way to Jamaica, the Cayman Islands also receiving a warning, and then Cuba.
What's going on?
Hi there, Jonathan. Well, the rain has now become persistent, but certainly where we are at the ocean side in Kingston, still no sign of those high winds arriving yet. The weather experts have told us in the last few moments that in the course of the next couple of hours or so, we can expect the arrival of the tropical storm force winds, but it's already going to be dark by the time the hurricane leading edge really blows into Jamaica on this southeast corner. But as far as what ordinary Jamaicans are doing, again, well, the streets, as far as we've seen, are fairly empty. People are tending to stay at home right now, but they're not racing around anymore, boarding up the windows and doors. They do seem to be taking a somewhat laid-back approach. Now, the government yesterday announced plans to evacuate up to 500,000 people from low-lying areas in and around Kingston. But again, there's no sign of a massive outflux of people. In fact, a government official has told us that so far only 500 to 1,000 people are in those government shelters, state schools, and also churches, which are doubling as shelters over the next few days. So what that leaves is a scenario that when those hurricane force winds do start to blow in, and if that produces a tidal surge at the same time, we could really see a last-minute rush of some of these residents into those emergency shelters, Jonathan.
Carl, Jamaica has nearly 3 million people. How many are in low-lying areas? How many people are considered at risk from this storm?
Well, certainly in the immediate area of Kingston, both in the capital and the outlying towns and villages nearby, the government estimates 500,000 people are at risk. So if you take away the figure of the 1,000 or so tops that are already in those shelters, it would still leave 499,000 people that potentially have to be mobilized at the last minute. And that certainly will be a tall order, despite all the transport they may or may not have, but to mobilize those people in hurricane force winds, Jonathan.
Let me ask you about transport. How many people are trying to get off the island entirely?
Well, the airport has now closed. The airport closed yesterday evening. There have been no flights out. In fact, the airport is across the bay behind us, and there have been no flights either in or out from the airport in the course of the day at all. About 7 o'clock last night, just around nightfall, was the last flight out of here. So there is no more chance for people to get out of the country. They've got to hunker down now. But many ordinary Jamaicans still really don't believe that this hurricane will blow across their island. Some of them still believe that the hurricane may turn away at the last minute. So weather experts saying that that's not going to be the case, that this hurricane could be catastrophic for the island. Potentially it could be worse than the 1988 Hurricane Gilbert that blew across the island, Jonathan.
CNN's Carl Penhall. Thanks very much.
Well, Carl giving us a sense of what's going on the ground. For a view from above, let's turn to the International Weather Centre.
Femi O'Kay is there. Femi, the people in Jamaica can't fly out. Most aren't moving out. How much trouble are they in for?
They've got about in the next 6, maybe 12 hours before that hurricane gets completely over them. It's moving quite slowly right now. Let me show you the view from one of the beaches in Kingston, Jamaica, from about 2 hours ago. Visibility already going down, the surf beginning to pick up. It's still, the main eye of the hurricane is still some way away from Jamaica, so it's moving very slowly. And let me pick up on what our reporter Carl Penhall was saying, in that many people don't believe it will actually hit the island of Jamaica, and that's because yesterday, for instance, in Montego Bay, beautiful, glorious weather. So the idea that there's this huge hurricane out there ready to move across the island was really hard for people to grasp. Like, I know that they're going into shelters now, and some people are preparing and heading up into inland areas and to higher ground, which is good news, because right away along the coastline, that's where you can see storm surge, which is flooding associated with a large tropical storm, and that can really wipe out that entire area across here. As I move a little bit further back, pan out from it, you can see all the cloud cover there, little bits of rain in these outer bands, which is why Carl looked a little bit on the wet side when he was reporting from Kingston, Jamaica. So we pan back, you'll see how enormous this storm is. Often I say that tropical systems are erratic, unreliable, but now it's so close to Jamaica, there is really nowhere else for it to go apart from across that island. Also know the track pretty carefully heads across through towards that western side of Cuba and then heading in a northerly direction as well. Once we get nearer towards the US, then the track becomes a little more uncertain. These are the wind speeds we're seeing right now. Carl said it's not feeling too windy, and he's about right, but as that hurricane heads further in towards Jamaica, those wind speeds picking up to 90, perhaps 100 kilometers an hour as they make their way through in towards the weekend. And this, again, the front right quarter of its direction is the most dangerous part for that hurricane to go. We get updates about once every 4 or 5 hours, so you'll often notice if I do regular updates, the wind speeds stay the same, 233 kilometers an hour. So that gives you an idea of where the hurricane is, where it's going to, and I will keep you in touch with all of that information, of course, here at the World Weather Centre. Back to the news desk.
All right, Femi, thank you very much.
Grenada hat der Hurrikan Ivan eine Spur der Verwüstung gezogen. Kaum ein Haus blieb unbeschädigt, viele wurden ganz zerstört. Auf der Insel und in 4 weiteren Karibikstaaten kamen mindestens 30 Menschen ums Leben. Ausläufer des Wirbelsturms haben bereits Jamaika und Haiti erreicht. Von dort dürfte Ivan nach Kuba und Florida weiterziehen. In dem US-Bundesstaat haben die Behörden wieder Zehntausende Bürger aufgerufen, sich in Sicherheit zu bringen.
Martin. Absolutely, Jonathan. As we saw the reports there, conditions are beginning to deteriorate now across Jamaica. We've seen the rain bands moving in. As we heard there, the conditions across the far southeastern corner of Jamaica not good at all, with the high winds beginning to move in. This is where Ivan is right now. We're looking down, of course, on the Caribbean, that huge swirl of cloud there covering a very large area. We've seen the battering waves, the rain affecting Haiti, the Dominican Republic, all the way down to Venezuela. And as I mentioned last time, it's going to be sucking a lot of moisture into Central America. We could see some problems with some flooding there over the course of the weekend. Now, this hurricane hurricane has weakened just a little bit, but not very much. We're still looking near the center at wind speeds around 220 kilometers an hour. If you work in miles per hour, that's about 135 miles per hour. It is continuing to edge closer and closer to Jamaica, right now about 130 kilometers to the southeast of Kingston, Jamaica. And here's the general forecast track. In fact, I'm going to change this to our cone version. I don't want you to look too much at the red line because, you know, as the forecast moves out towards the weekend, it's less accurate. So really look at the shaded area for the real effects of the hurricane across Jamaica, the Cayman Islands, Western Cuba seeing the worst of it, I think, on Sunday. And then, of course, as we head into Monday and Tuesday, we could see that impact begin to affect Florida. The rain is going to be tremendous. In fact, the big orange ball of colour then is the heavy rain pulling across Jamaica there, all the way across into Western Cuba by the late portion of the weekend. A lot of rain in the forecast as well, of course, as those devastating winds. In fact, we can look at the sort of thing we can expect from this storm, which is still a Category 4. The storm surge 4 to 6 metres there, and of course extensive outside wall failure and roofs blown off. So a lot of destruction likely, certainly for Jamaica, as we head through the next couple of days. Jamaicans remembering, of course, almost exactly 16 years ago when Hurricane Gilbert crossed Jamaica, and that was a weak Category 3. We're dealing here with a potent Category 4. We'll keep you up to date here at World Weather. Jonathan, back to you.
Im Hafen am Wasser lässt sich die Stärke des Hurrikans am besten ermessen, sagt Jim. Wasser sei die Hauptgefahr. Der Sturm rast jetzt mit 120 Kilometern pro Stunde durch Fort Pierce.
Alle Wetterstationen Amerikas bekommen diese Bilder von mir umsonst. Die zeigen sie im Fernsehen, um die Bevölkerung zu warnen und ihr klarzumachen, wie gefährlich Hurricanes sind.
Von diesem Restaurant ist schon jetzt nicht mehr viel übrig. Jim hat sich inzwischen mit anderen Sturmjägern zusammengetan. Gemeinsam fühlen sie sich sicher. Die Wohngebiete hat die Polizei schon vor Tagen zwangsevakuiert. Die Jungs vertreiben sich die Zeit auf ihre Weise. Sie warten, bis der Wind noch stärker wird. Doch dann bringen auch sie sich in Sicherheit. Mit mehr als 180 Stundenkilometern treibt der Wind jetzt Metallteile und Hölzer vor sich her. Jim weiß, dass das lebensgefährlich ist.
Verrückte Menschen überleben das nicht lange. Und ich mache das schon eine ganze Weile. Ich habe eine Aufgabe. Ich bin nicht verrückt.
Im Hafen von Fort Pierce hat der Sturm die meisten Boote zerstört. In ganz Florida hat Francis Schäden in Milliardenhöhe angerichtet. 21 Menschen verloren ihr Leben. Ivan wird neue Opfer fordern, trotz der Sturmjäger.
This again, footage that was captured from the onboard cameras on the outside of the International Space Station. This specific footage captured on Saturday evening at about 7:11 p.m. Eastern from its orbital path about 229 miles overhead. This footage clearly showing Hurricane Ivan as it was traveling just to the south of Jamaica onto the southern Caribbean. At this time, Hurricane Ivan has been re-elevated to a level 5 hurricane. It's traveling at west-northwest at 8 knots with max winds at 140 knots and gusting to 170 knots. Again, that was video that was captured over the weekend by the International Space Station onboard cameras. This image you're seeing now is a still photo that was captured by the crew on board also this weekend. These again, various photos of Hurricane Ivan as it was just passing to the south of Jamaica. That hurricane now at this time re-elevated to a level 5 storm and just passing to the west of Cuba.
The latest on the storm's path through the Caribbean and discussion on this and other recent weather patterns. Stay with us. Hurricane Ivan, or as many have come to refer to it as Ivan the Terrible, continues its path of destruction in the Caribbean Sea. Jamaica was spared a direct hit by the powerful storm's eye, but northern quadrants of the hurricane are battering the island with damaging winds, torrential rains, and storm surge flooding. Carl Penhall is weathering the storm in the Jamaican capital, Kingston. He filed a report a short time ago.
Hurricane Ivan has been pounding Jamaica, especially its southern coast and the capital, Kingston, throughout the night. Police, however, say it's way too early to make any preliminary assessment of damage to buildings and other structures, or to make any statements in terms of loss of human life or injuries so far. What they have told us is that one woman is missing, presumed drowned. She disappeared after storm-driven tides raced through her home in a neighborhood of Kingston in the early hours of this morning. Other people have called into the emergency services reporting that their homes were being ripped apart by these hurricane winds and by storm waters. Police, however, have largely been unable to get out onto the streets to evacuate these people at the height of the storm. We do understand from police that one of the major highways leading from the capital to the eastern section of the country has been washed out by storm tides. That highway was on the coastal area. We're also told that at least 15,000 Jamaicans are currently being housed in emergency shelters as they escape from these storms. Here in the capital, Kingston, we've seen many power pylons down, trees are littered across the capital, and most of the island, we're told by emergency services, is now without power. The strange thing here, weather experts told us that as the eye of the hurricane approached the southern coast of Jamaica, it inexplicably took a left turn and headed west. They now tell us that the storm is likely to cross along the western edge of the country. That could mean for several hours more that western part of Jamaica is still in for a huge battering. In addition to the problems of rescuing people, evacuating people, and clearing the streets so emergency services can get through, the police and Jamaican Defense Forces have been battling against a number of Jamaican gangs who have been on the streets, taking advantage of the storm to loot commercial centers and gas stations. Last night, as we moved from an oceanside position back towards an inland position, we came across a police unit that minutes earlier had apprehended 5 men as they were looting a gas station. The police told us that shots had been fired. They had engaged in a brief gun battle with those looters. As you can see then, emergency services right now fighting a twin battle, fighting to help the victims of this hurricane and also fighting to keep a lid on the law and order situation. Carl Penhall, CNN, Kingston, Jamaica.
Fritz Nevos is tracking Ivan from the International Weather Center. He joins us now from there with the latest. Fritz.
Well, Melissa, we continue to track Ivan. It's a very strong hurricane still, packing winds over 220 kilometers per hour, still a Category 4. And you can see it right here. Now the center has been located at about 30 miles just south of the Jamaican west coast. So they are feeling the hurricane force winds and will continue to do so for the next few hours, unfortunately. And we do expect anywhere from 9 to 12 inches of rain. That's up to 300 millimeters of rain with that system over the next 24 hours. hours. And you can see that it is continuing to push west-northwest, and this is the motion that we see for the next few days. And as you can tell by our water temperature map, it's going to be moving over even warmer waters. So the probability of Ivan strengthening is even stronger, and we might see Category 4 hurricane before it hits the west coast of Cuba. And by the way, we have now a hurricane warning for part of the western parts of Cuba. Hurricane watch remains in effect for most of the island, and we're going to continue to see Ivan push into the west and take a more northerly track during the next 36 hours. This is the latest that we have. You can see the winds have diminished just a little bit at 230 kilometers per hour, still moving west-northwest at 12 kilometers per hour. So by late Sunday into Monday, the system should be very close to the western parts of Cuba and possibly making landfall there. But you can see that it might still remain on a Category 4 on our scale of 5, but still a very strong hurricane. So people should be really preparing for that over the next a few hours. This is the probabilities track that the system has. You can see it can go either on the right, on the left side of this, but typically this is what we expect. And over the next 48 hours, you can see it right on the western parts of Cuba. So it will be affecting the weather there. Very severe flooding is expected. Also some very windy and wet conditions. I just want to show you what we do expect if you have a Category 5 hurricane. You can see the winds are going to be more than 249 kilometers per hour. The storm surge at 6 meters, meaning near 18 feet, and we're going to expecting a building completely destroyed, shrubs, trees, and sign blown down, and extensive flooding. This is what we get in a Category 5 hurricane. That's all we have for now. Let's go back to Welita.
Fritz, thank you very much. For more discussion now on the climate and weather patterns that we've been seeing recently, we're joined in Washington by Benjamin Preston. He's a senior research fellow with the Pew Center on Global Climate Change and serves as the center's in-house environmental scientist. Mr. Preston, thank you very much for joining us. What in your mind explains this increasing intensity and frequency of hurricanes this season?
Well, the hurricanes we've experienced this season actually appear to be related to various patterns of natural variability. And so for someone who, for example, lives in Florida, the hurricanes they've experienced may seem like an anomaly. But if you look at these events in their historical context, we've actually seen 3 hurricanes strike the coast of Florida in the past, once in 1926 and once in 1964. So there is some question as to whether we really are seeing an increase in the frequency or severity of these kinds of storms and extreme events, or whether we're just more acutely tuned to these types of events because of news information as well as ongoing concerns about global warming and climate change in general.
Yes, speaking of global warming, some contend that as the waters get warmer, temperatures have risen. Scientists tend to agree to that. They disagree on why and what the impact would be. But could that be in any way connected in your mind?
It's not necessarily related to the recent increases in hurricane activity that we've seen in the Atlantic. For example, hurricane activity in the Atlantic goes through periods of high activity followed by periods of low activity, and unfortunately it looks like during the mid-1990s we re-entered one of these periods of high hurricane activity. However, there's certainly concern that in the future, as global warming, which is now upon us, continues, we may see increases in the frequency or severity of extreme weather events like hurricanes or floods or droughts. But unfortunately, the when, where, and how much still remains quite uncertain.
I'd like to bring in our discussion here, my colleague, our meteorologist Fritz Nevos. He has a few thoughts also on what he has been monitoring. Fritz, your thoughts? Do you have a question for Mr. Preston?
Yes, I was just going to mention that we had reports of developing El Nino in the Central Pacific, and typically El Nino would be suppressing the hurricane activity into the Atlantic region, but I'm not sure if they have been studying that and see how it will affect this season here into the Atlantic region.
Yes, indeed. We know that El Nino has a significant influence on the formation and magnitude of hurricanes in the Atlantic. From what I've heard, there is some debate as to whether El Nino will, in fact, maybe suppress hurricane activity later in the season, which may bring us some relief. But I think we're going to have to see how that El Nino continues to develop.
I wanted to ask you about what I was reading as a possible reason for this. And I was reading that this is part of a cycle, according to some scientists, which began since '95. And that part of the reason is a stagnant weather pattern, the lack of winds.
Winds in the atmosphere certainly have an influence on hurricane formation, particularly hurricane strength. This natural cycle of variability you're referring to, I think, is referred to as the North Atlantic Oscillation. And again, you have these periods where for several decades you'll have a relatively low period of activity with respect to hurricanes, and then that will be followed by another part of the cycle where you have high activity. For example, from the 1970s up until around the early to mid-1990s, there's a fairly quiet period of time for the Atlantic with respect to hurricane formation.
And so just one last quick question. What can we expect in the months to come and in the years to come?
Well, certainly we're going to expect these patterns, these natural cycles of variability to continue indefinitely. I mean, hurricanes and other natural disasters are here to stay. One of the things that remains a large question mark is how climate change and global warming from human activities is going to interact with these cycles of natural variability. But the interesting thing is, because more and more people are moving to coastal regions, because of continued economic growth and development, the damages, at least the economic damages and potentially losses of human life, are going to continue to grow well into the future, regardless of what assumptions we make about climate change and natural climate variability.
Benjamin Preston with the Pew Center on Global Climate Change. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us. And remember, for the latest weather conditions from over 10,000 cities, you can click onto our website. The address is cnn.com/weather. We'll have a check of the day's other top stories when World News returns, so stay with us.
You can see it right here. The center has been located about 90 kilometers southeast of Grand Cayman, and you can see the system is continuing to push across, and there is potential for some even strengthening. So we might see a Category 5 hurricane in our hands in about 24 hours. So we do have hurricane warnings in effect for the Cayman Islands. We still have a hurricane warning in effect for most of western Cuba, and still a hurricane watch for all of Cuba, still valid right now. And for Jamaica, we still have a tropical storm warning, but that might be canceled later on today, as the winds are going to be diminishing as the hurricane moves away in the morning. So we're going to see the latest on that hurricane. You can see the winds near 250 kilometers per hour. So beyond that, it will be a Category 5 and still moving west at about 14 kilometers per hour. So it's not moving fast, but moving steadily. You can see the yellow here. This is the tropical force winds that extend anywhere from up to 280 kilometers from the center of the system, and we do have the hurricane force winds that extend to 150 kilometers from the system. So you can see right now it's a Category 4, so it is going to continue to strengthen, and will be moving across the Cayman Islands and also affect western Cuba, and of course we will keep you updated.
This is video of Hurricane Ivan that was captured by the onboard cameras yesterday. This video was taken at about 5:30 p.m. Central Time on Monday, just as Ivan was landing upon Cuba with winds at about 160 miles an hour. In this view, you can see as the station is just approaching overhead, and part of the antenna in the view. Since this video was captured, Ivan has since made its way to the Gulf of Mexico for possible landfall along the coast of east central U.S. As of this morning, Ivan had been downgraded to a Category 3 hurricane, but a hurricane watch remains in effect for the northern Gulf of Mexico coast from Morgan City, Louisiana, eastward to St. Marks, Florida, including the greater New Orleans, Louisiana area. Again, this is video that was captured yesterday about 5:33 p.m. Central Time on Monday, just as Ivan was landing on Cuba with winds about 160 miles an hour. These views captured from the external cameras on board the outside of the International Space Station. Again, that was video that was captured yesterday by the crew on board the International Space Station. That video taken at about 5:33 p.m. Central Time. We have some additional still photo images that were taken by the crew and sent down that we can share for you. Again, these shots taken from an altitude of about 230 miles above the Earth. As of this morning, Ivan has been downgraded to a Category 3 hurricane.
Jamaica's Prime Minister predicts his country's current death toll from Ivan, 11, will increase after officials reach outlying areas. The hurricane's powerful winds and heavy rain cause landslides and flooding across the country. Cal Penhall reports.
Hurricane Ivan whips up waves and smashes concrete on the quayside in downtown Kingston. As winds tail off, storm survivors venture out of emergency shelters and pick their way through debris to see what's left of their homes.
Eventually, it's like a all-inclusive earthquake, hurricane, everything in one, volcano. It's terrible.
Edgar Wallace says he fled in the black of night as the sea lashed at his door. This is what's left of his house in Kingston's Shooters Hill neighborhood. Entire rooms have been washed away. In a nearby neighborhood, a woman drowned in the tidal surge.
After we see that it was getting worse, we have to leave because we don't know whether it would rise higher or it would get less, so we have to leave when we could leave because it was windy bad.
Power lines are down, electricity's out across most of Jamaica. Authorities say many highways are blocked by landslides and floods. As soon as weather conditions permit, Prime Minister Patterson has ordered a government reconnaissance team to fly across the island by helicopter to draw up a full death and injury toll and damage assessment.
It is obvious that there is no part of Jamaica which has been immune.
He's also ordered a dusk to dawn curfew in Jamaica's main cities and towns to prevent outbreaks of looting. We came across this gang late Friday, just as Hurricane Ivan was blowing in. The alleged looters were arrested minutes after engaging police in a gun battle. Down at the ocean side, the power of the waves driven by those incredible winds did the damage. Up here in the hills just above Kingston, the trees torn out by the hurricane have smashed everything in their path. At least one woman is reported to have died in this poor neighborhood. Others, like carpenter Clarence Francis and his family, have been left homeless. He was asleep in a back room when this tree crashed through the front of his wooden tin home.
I'm still frightened. I'm still in a shock. You know? Knowing that the tree fall on the house and we all inside, we could have died.
For now, the family is sheltering with neighbours. Francis doesn't know when they'll have the materials or the money to begin rebuilding. Carl Penhall with the camera of Neil Holsworth, CNN, Kingston, Jamaica.
And for the rest of you, let's take a closer look now at World News. Has ever seen, and according to the U.S. National Hurricane Center, it is the 6th strongest storm ever recorded in the Atlantic Basin. Hurricane Ivan, living up to its nickname of Ivan the Terrible, is bearing down on the Cayman Islands with ferocious winds and storm surge flooding. Authorities there have declared a state of emergency. The very strong Category 4 storm is churning toward Grand Cayman Island, the largest of the British territory's 3 islands. Ivan's eye is expected to pass over the island or just southwest of it in the coming hours. The destruction already in Ivan's path is evidence enough for those still in the storm's path to board up their homes and seek refuge. Jamaica was the storm's most recent victim. The full extent of damage there is still unclear. Millions of people remain in the hurricane's path, including residents of storm-weary Cuba and the U.S. state of Florida. The storm is already blamed for the deaths of at least 41 people across the Caribbean. While hundreds of people have fled the Cayman Islands, many of the estimated 45,000 residents of the British territory have moved to shelters ahead of Ivan's arrival. Earlier, we spoke to government spokeswoman Joan Scott Campbell about the precautions being taken.
The smallest of the 3 islands, Little Cayman, most persons left there from Friday evening. The next island, Cayman Brac, there are persons there. Their population is roughly about 2,000, and their persons, most of the population is there. Some tourists, most tourists left Cayman Brac also by Friday.
Cuban President Fidel Castro says his country is prepared for the hurricane. Ivan is forecast to hit the communist island nation by Monday. For more on the preparations there, Lucia Newman joins us from Havana. Lucia.
Hello, Relitza. Well, Hurricane Ivan, on its present course and at its present speed is expected to reach Cuba in about 35 hours. Yet authorities here say that they're already expecting some flooding along Cuba's southern coast by this evening. Already some 400,000 people have been evacuated from central and eastern Cuba, which is not directly in the path of the hurricane. And as we speak, hundreds of thousands more are starting to be evacuated in the western part of the country, especially Pinar del Rio and Havana provinces. Now, a lot of tourists have also been evacuated. Canadian tour operators started pulling out their guests from this country about 2 days ago. Those who are still here are being moved to hotels away from the beach side to safer ground. In the meantime, the airport has been closed both to national and international traffic. Relitza.
Lucia, tell us how prepared are people and how protected are they?
People have a lot of information here about what they have to do to protect their lives. They also know they have to store water, food, gather candles and batteries in order to listen to the radio. All those sorts of things they have done. It is, however, very difficult for people to try and protect their property once they themselves have got out of harm's way by going to shelters. If they live near the coast or in very weak buildings that are deemed to not be able to withstand the torrential rains and the winds, they then have to come back and see the aftermath, because here there are no hardware stores, there's no tape readily available for people to try to protect their homes, Relitza.
How seriously are they heeding the orders for evacuations and the precautions that they must take?
They're heeding them very, very seriously. This country is very well organized to deal with natural disasters of this kind. People listen to the radio, the television. They're organized, in fact, by block committees. So as the hurricane approaches, people's names are written down on a piece of paper, and the people who live in every house that has to be evacuated must say where they're going. If they don't go to a government-organized shelter, that is to a church, a school, or a government building, if they're going instead to friends or relatives' homes elsewhere, they must say where they're going. There's very careful accounting taken of people's whereabouts. People are forbidden from walking out on the streets after a certain hour once the storm approaches as well, Relitza.
I wanted to ask you about this western part of the island, which is expected to be worst hit by the eye of this hurricane. What can you tell us about that part of the country? What are the risks involved, the damage that could be incurred?
Well, Pinar del Rio province always seems to get the brunt of these hurricanes, and it looks like this will not be the exception. It's a province that's very well known for its tobacco. That's where the raw material for Cuba's famous cigars comes from. And already they were very, very badly hit by Hurricane Charlie exactly 1 month ago. In fact, parts of Pinar del Rio still don't have electricity from that hurricane. It's also heavily populated, and many people live near the coast. It's where a lot of people have died in previous hurricanes. So there have been massive evacuations along the low-lying areas of that province.
Die Zahl der Toten durch Hurrikan Ivan ist mittlerweile auf mehr als 55 gestiegen. Und das, obwohl der Wirbelsturm noch keinen bevölkerungsreichen Staat mit voller Wucht getroffen hat. Ivan rast jetzt auf Kuba zu und ist inzwischen wieder in die höchste Kategorie auf der Hurrikan-Skala, die Kategorie 5, eingestuft worden. Mario Turic berichtet.
In der vergangenen Nacht war Jamaika dran. Der Wind fegte mit Tempo 250 über die Insel, eine Flutwelle überschwemmte viele Küstengebiete. Die meisten Opfer starben durch entwurzelte Bäume. In den größeren Städten patrouilliert inzwischen die Polizei, Plünderer sind in den vielen eingestürzten Häusern unterwegs. Inzwischen hat die Regierung über die größeren Städte des Landes eine nächtliche Ausgangssperre verhängt. Für die Karibikinsel hätte es noch schlimmer kommen können. Kurz bevor das Zentrum des Hurrikans Jamaika überquerte, drehte Ivan plötzlich in Richtung Westen ab. Meteorologen rechnen nun damit, dass er auf seiner weiteren Bahn zunächst Westkuba und dann die USA irgendwo an der Küste zwischen Florida und Alabama treffen wird. Immerhin ist der Wirbelsturm so furchteinflößend, dass sogar Fidel Castro im kubanischen Fernsehen seinem Volk die Zugbahn erklärt. Den Sturm selbst verglich der Maximo Leader mit einem Atomschlag. Die ständig wechselnden Nachrichten über den genauen Weg des Hurrikans beunruhigen auch immer mehr Bewohner Floridas. Nachdem es zunächst so aussah, als ob es die Menschen im Süden treffen würde, ist nun eher der Norden in Sorge vor dem Sturm. Alle sind sehr angespannt, sagt diese Frau, auch die seit Jahren hier leben. Wir sind seit Jahren verschont geblieben. Viele meinen, dass diesmal wir dran sind. Egal wo, für Florida wird es die schlimmste Hurrikansaison seit langem. 3 Wirbelstürme dieser Größe in einem Sommer, das gab es hier zuletzt 1964.
Halbinsel Mexikos über den Golf von Mexiko in die Südstaaten der USA führt. Er ist der schreckliche, das kann man schon so sagen, weil er Windgeschwindigkeiten hat um dieses Auge herum von etwa bis zu 300 Kilometer in der Stunde in einzelnen Böen. Er soll sich zwar ein bisschen abschwächen, aber was heißt das schon, wenn er dann noch 270 Kilometer in der Stunde drauf hat? Er kann also jetzt in den nächsten Stunden hier an Kuba vorbei. Sie sehen es hier weiß eingezeichnet, die Umrisse hier Yucatan vorbeiziehen und ja, etliche Zerstörungen noch mit sich bringen. Das war's vom Wetter. Ich wünsche Ihnen einen schönen Abend und machen Sie es gut.
Welcome back. Well, for days now we've been telling you about the potential death and destruction caused by Hurricane Ivan.
That's right, and the storm's not through yet. For the latest, let's go get the forecast from the International Weather Centre. Femi O'Kay, nice to see you.
Hello there, Michael. Back from community service around the globe. Nice to see you too. On a very serious note, this is the eye of Hurricane Ivan. It looks quite spectacular. It's about 30 miles across. And this picture that's taken from space looks absolutely stunning, doesn't it? The devastation that it's caused as it's moved through the Caribbean has been immense. It's not over yet, unfortunately. Last week was the peak, statistically speaking, for Atlantic hurricanes to form. So if there is a silver lining to the very large clouds, it is that from now onwards we should see less in the way of hurricane activity. But first, we have to deal with this. This is a Category 5 hurricane, has immense power. That power is actually helped by the water, which fuels it, the warm water, plus plus its wind speeds, which give it its Category 5. Cuba is here, that western side of Cuba. This is the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico, and our track takes it into the Gulf of Mexico. But here we have warm waters, and we could see it almost fluctuate between a 5 and a 4, and that intensity go backwards and forwards. Where you see those orange colours, that's where you're seeing the real intense amount of rainfall. Anywhere that's blue or green also bring in some rain, but lighter amounts of rain. So you can take a look to see what a Category 5 can do. Those wind speeds can go way over 249 kilometres an hour, storm surge of over 6 metres, and basically complete destruction of buildings. It's sort of damage that we've seen already in the Cayman Islands, and still getting some of those reports in from the Cayman Islands there. So that track by Thursday taking us on land, and when I say on land, it means that the centre of this storm actually heads onto the land. Sounds very simple, doesn't it, really? For the next couple of days, we're watching it very closely. Right now, affecting that western side of Cuba. Also expecting to see some really high tides around this region there as well, plus some rip tides as well. So although it's very inviting to go and head down to the beach and check out those very large waves, it is also very, very dangerous. In the next 72 hours, expecting it to make landfall in the US. But in the meantime, let me show you the kind of waves they were seeing at 11 o'clock local time in Cuba. And this is what we talk about storm surge. This is ahead of the storm. It churns up so much in the way of tides and the rainfall, and that all of that seafront comes in with those incredible high waves. In Jamaica, they had waves that were 2 stories high. So it gives you an idea of why the coastal areas are always or should be evacuated, because they're most dangerous during a time of a hurricane. Head back here towards the World Weather Centre. Let me do some more weather for you, this time taking you in towards the US, watching the progress of our Hurricane Ivan here in a cluster of big thunderstorms and showers, gradually easing up through that southeastern section of the US. Further out towards the west, expect to see some rain moving through that northern tier of the Rockies. Further down towards the southwest, actually looking at some nice pleasant weather, and the sunshine spreading down through in towards parts of Texas there as well. A number of weather fronts moving into Pacific Northwest, so watch out for those. Chicago at 29, Montreal at 16 degrees in Celsius. And one more place to take you away from Hurricane Ivan, just very swiftly picking up on another tropical system about 2 or 3 days away from here. That's Baja, California. Let me just give you the track so you don't lose track of it. This is Hurricane Javier, and it's moving at 16 kilometers an hour. That's a look at your global weather forecast. Back to Michael.
Und den Cayman-Inseln angerichtet.
Die ersten Ausläufer des Hurrikans haben Kuba erreicht. In der Hauptstadt Havanna stürzten Bäume um, zahlreiche Gebäude wurden beschädigt. Etwa 1,5 Millionen Bewohner haben ihre Häuser verlassen und sich in Sicherheit gebracht. Satellitenaufnahmen zeigen das Ausmaß des Wirbelsturms. Bislang hat der Hurrikan bereits mindestens 63 Menschenleben gekostet.
This video taken Tuesday evening by the crew on board from the external cameras on board the space station as they were approaching over Hurricane Ivan. This video was captured about 7:03 p.m. Eastern Time on September 14th as the station flew 230 statute miles over the Gulf of Mexico. Again, this is a closer view of Hurricane Ivan as the International Space Station was passing overhead yesterday evening. Hurricane Ivan continues its approach to the northern Gulf Coast at this time. According to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, a hurricane warning is in effect from Grand Isle, Louisiana to the Apalachia, Florida, including the greater New Orleans area and Lake Pontchartrain. Hurricane conditions are expected within that warning area, generally within the next 24 hours. As you can see in this view, Hurricane Ivan is a large hurricane with hurricane force winds extending outward up to 105 miles from the center, and tropical storm force winds extending upward to 260 miles. Again, this is video of Hurricane Ivan as the International Space Station was passing overhead. This video taken about 7:03 p.m. on Tuesday evening. As of 7 a.m. this morning, NOAA was reporting the large eye of the hurricane was centered about 180 miles south-southeast of the mouth of the Mississippi River. Again, that was video captured yesterday or Tuesday evening about 7:03 Eastern Time by the external cameras on board the International Space Station. We have some additional still photos that were captured by the orbiting laboratories that was passing overhead. Hurricane Ivan is moving toward the north-northwest near 12 miles per hour. A turn to the north is expected today. On this track, the core of Ivan will be near the coast within the warning area early Thursday morning. Ivan continues at this time as a Category 4 hurricane. Maximum sustained winds near 140 miles per hour with higher gusts. Some fluctuations in intensity are expected during the next 24 hours.
Zug durch die Karibik rast Hurricane Ivan jetzt auf die Südostküste der USA zu, mit Windgeschwindigkeiten von 275 Stundenkilometern. Besonders gefährdet ist New Orleans. Dort fliehen die Menschen in Massen ins Landesinnere. Wer blieb, sicherte sein Haus so gut es ging ab. Von den Bohrinseln im Golf von Mexiko haben Ölfirmen tausende Arbeiter abgezogen. Und auch die Zoos werden wegen der drohenden Sturmfluten geräumt.
Der Hurrikan Ivan liegt jetzt über dem Golf von Mexiko, bringt Windgeschwindigkeiten von rund 270, 275 Kilometer pro Stunde mit sich, dreht sich gegen den Uhrzeigersinn und zieht jetzt gegen die Südostküste der USA, wird voraussichtlich in der kommenden Nacht dort erwartet, geht an Land, etwa in Höhe der Bundesstaaten Mississippi und Alabama. Betroffen ist ein mehrere hundert Kilometer breiter Küstenstreifen. Aber auch die Stadt New Orleans ist davon betroffen. Und dazu muss man wissen, dass diese Stadt größtenteils unter dem Meeresspiegel liegt. Also nicht der Wind selber ist dort das Problem, sondern die Flutwelle, die Ivan vor sich hertreibt. Die könnte New Orleans im schlimmsten Fall über mehrere Wochen unter Wasser setzen.
Are gusting harder and harder along the U.S. Gulf Coast as a powerful hurricane swirls closer. The Eye of Ivan is expected to make landfall early on Thursday. Nearly 2 million people in 4 states have been ordered to evacuate. Rick Sanchez is in Florida, a state already battered by 2 hurricanes since last month. He joins us from Panama City. Hello.
It's interesting. Yeah, it's interesting, Fanula, that you should mention that, because it's those 2 hurricanes that have precipitated a mass evacuation here. Not that officials wouldn't have called for the evacuation either way, but that the response from the people who live in this area has been quite dramatic. Very few people have been staying around when they heard that there was a Category 4 hurricane off the coast. Now, this particular area where we are is still likely 100 miles or so from what they say will be the eye of the storm when it approaches landfill. That's most likely to happen somewhere around Mobile, Alabama. We have already been getting some reports, and you can see just as I'm starting this report that the wind is once again picking up. We're getting gusts here of about 20 to 30 miles an hour here in the Panama City Beach area. We are also being told that there has been some damage in an area that's about 50 miles from here, and we hope to be able to get some pictures of that as well. We understand it has more to do with the fact that there are people who have built their homes very close to the sand, and the erosion from the beach dissipates the foundation. Therefore, some of these homes are literally falling into the water. So that's the worst of it, as we're hearing now. Obviously, over the next 12 hours, things are going to get a whole lot worse, so say forecasters, for this part of the panhandle of the state of Florida, from an area called Apalachicola all the way to Pensacola. Bill and Karen Ferguson are joining us now. Come on in here, folks. I just ran into these folks. They were here on the beach. You're originally from Dallas, I believe. Is that right?
Yes.
What brings you to this locale?
We own a unit here.
Are you, it's funny that you should be here, because obviously we've got the hurricane coming. Are you a little concerned? What have you done about it? And why are you walking on the beach, for heaven's sake?
Definitely concerned, especially because everybody else is just packed up and gone. We live in the villas across the street there. It's not as windy and rainy as it is out here, but you walk around the complex over there and there's maybe 5 cars in the whole place, and everybody's just took off and left days ago, not knowing what was going to happen, but knew it was coming this way.
You know the story of Charlie, a hurricane we had about a month ago that was expected to go to Tampa and ended up going a little bit to the right, and it hit Punta Gorda. Does it concern you that something like that could happen with this hurricane, and are you ready to go if that were the case?
Yeah. We can leave just any time, as long as we can get out before
we got our
close the bridge.
Bag packed. We got plenty of water and a big ice chest with 3 big bags of ice in the cooler if we have to. We got a little dog at home, so you can't go just anywhere with a little dog either, because a lot of hotels won't take dogs.
So as soon as you hear that there's a possibility that the storm surge could go into this area, it would basically block your exit. You're going to get out before then, though, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah. If it's coming this way, full strength, like they originally predicted, we're gone. But we like to tough things out too. It's kind of exciting actually, because you're used to tornadoes in North Texas. You don't get a whole lot of hurricanes there. So
Well, we're here through a couple of tropical storms, though.
We thank you guys for taking time to talk to us. Good luck. We'll be touching base with you a little bit later on. Here's what we've been hearing from some of the folks here who've been monitoring things as well. You can see how dramatic the scene looks back there, the imagery of some of those waves coming up on the shore. This is usually a lot more placid. We were told not long ago that they've actually recorded a wave about 200 miles offshore that is 34 feet in height. So that's the situation here as we see it right now from Panama City Beach. I'm Rick Sanchez. Fanula, back to you.
Thanks indeed, Rick Sanchez there joining us from Panama City, where the weather is expected to deteriorate over the next 12 hours, as he reported. Well, for more on the unruly Ivan and a look at the weather elsewhere, here's Femi Oke at the CNN International Weather Centre.
Hello there, Tiffany. I'll show you where, in relation to Hurricane Ivan, Rick and those tourists were standing. This is the eye of Hurricane Ivan, and it's actually got quite a lot of cloud in here. These are where some of the strongest winds will be. It's still a way away from land right now, not expected to head into land until the early hours of Thursday morning local time. But look how huge this hurricane system is, stretching from Louisiana across through in towards that northern section of the Florida Panhandle. So, if I could see it, Panama City would be underneath here. So what they're experiencing, you saw those little bits of rain, that grey cloud, and those wind speeds gusting up to 39 kilometres an hour. But when this gets here, it's going to be so much stronger. Rick will be reporting from Panama City, so we will see how that weather deteriorates. This gives you an idea of where the hurricane force winds are. Around the eye is the orange area, which gives you the hurricane force winds, and you have the tropical storm winds in the yellow section. Right now, a hurricane is seeing winds persistent at over 200 kilometers an hour. It's amazing what you can do with some weather data. What I'm going to do is watch along here in our legend, and I will show you as that hurricane comes on land. We're expected to see the power cuts or the power outages, as they say here in the US, just where that hurricane comes on land, particularly from Mobile, just across through into that eastern side of Louisiana. That's what we're expecting to see because of the weather deteriorating. We're expecting to see that loss of power from happening. The track takes it on across into land on Thursday. That means the eye makes landfall and then moving up in towards Georgia for Friday. Expecting to see a lot of rain, and anywhere in that coloured area, that highlighted area, expecting to see a lot of rain, a lot of wind, and some very high wind speeds as well. Crossing.
At this time, Hurricane Ivan is a Category 4 hurricane and approaching the northern Gulf Coast. A hurricane warning is in effect from Grand Isle, Louisiana into Florida, including the greater New Orleans area and Lake Pontchartrain. Hurricane conditions are expected within that warning area within the next 24 hours.
Probably have your cameras out there. What a big hurricane, huh?
Yeah, Mike, we're looking at it right now, and it's a pretty amazing sight. And let's hope and pray for the folks down there on the Gulf Coast that it's not too bad.
I agree. On the other hand, it looks like it's definitely grew in strength since yesterday. The eye is much more pronounced, and the storm does look bigger. So there's always hope that it'll weaken as soon as it gets close to land.
Copy that, Mike. We've been hearing the winds are between 130 and 140 miles an hour, and they've been hopeful that it'll weaken to Category 3, but it's certainly a strong storm.
And especially big.
It's at a discussion between flight engineer and NASA astronaut Mike Fink on board the International Space Station as he was talking with the ground control team here in Houston.
I never thought I'd be taking so many atmospheric photos on this mission, but grateful for the opportunity. Sorry that there are hurricanes, though.
Copy that, Mike. And there's another one, as you know, in the Caribbean following Ivan.
Again, this live video from the International Space Station. These images captured from external cameras mounted on the outside of the International Space Station and remotely controlled by ground controllers here in Houston. As you can see, some portions of the International Space Station in view itself with Hurricane Ivan in the background. At this time, Hurricane Ivan is classified as a Category 4 storm with maximum sustained winds near 135 miles per hour with higher gusts. Some fluctuations in intensity are possible prior to landfall. But Ivan is expected to make landfall as a major hurricane, a Category 3 or higher.
Again, this is some last views from the International Space Station as it's passing over the Gulf of Mexico. These shots provided by cameras mounted on the exterior of the International Space Station, which you can see some portions of the truss segment and solar arrays in this view as the remnants of Hurricane Ivan are underneath. At this time, the space station traveling about 230 miles overhead and traveling at about 17,500 miles per hour.
Monstersturm, wie sich die US-Südstaaten auf die Ankunft des Hurrikans Ivan vorbereiten.
Nach jüngsten Berechnungen von heute Abend wird Hurricane Ivan irgendwo zwischen den US-Bundesstaaten Louisiana und Alabama aufs Land treffen. Selbst die Ausläufer des Wirbelsturms könnten die tiefliegende Stadt New Orleans völlig unter Wasser setzen. Darum sind viele Menschen aus der Jazzmetropole geflohen. Die dort bleiben müssen, weil sie kein Auto haben und keinen Zug mehr bekommen haben, werden aufgerufen, in die Hochhäuser zu gehen. Aus den USA berichtet Ulrich Oppold.
Urlauber, die aus dem Hotelfenster schauten, erlebten die gewaltige Zerstörungskraft von Hurrikan Ivan, der zuletzt über die Cayman-Inseln hereinbrach. Orkanböen mit mehr als 200 Kilometern in der Stunde verwüsteten das Urlaubsparadies. Flugzeuge wurden durch die Luft gewirbelt, Straßen überspült und viele Häuser zerstört. Die meisten Touristen in den Strandhotels hatten sich rechtzeitig in Sicherheit gebracht oder waren vorher abgereist. Von der Karibik aus zog der Wirbelsturm über den Golf von Mexiko weiter in Richtung Südküste der Vereinigten Staaten. Hier wird Ivan morgen früh erwartet. Seit Tagen fliehen insgesamt 750.000 Menschen ins Landesinnere und stehen nach kurzer Zeit schon wieder im Stau, kilometerlang. Die Behörden fordern eindringlich alle Küstenbewohner auf, die Region sofort zu verlassen. Die Menschen packen das Nötigste zusammen, oft wissen sie gar nicht wohin. Wir haben eigentlich gar keinen Plan. Alle Hotels sind ausgebucht. Wir fahren einfach mal Richtung Norden und hoffen das Beste. Wer Glück hat, erwischt noch eines der letzten Flugzeuge, das in New Orleans starten darf. Mit dem Hubschrauber wurden die Ölarbeiter von den Bohrinseln im Golf von Mexiko geholt. Fischereiboote machen in den Häfen fest. Und auch dieser Zoo muss alle Tiere aus der Gefahrenzone evakuieren. Löwen und Tiger werden reisefertig betäubt. Wo wir hier stehen, hatten wir 1,5 Meter hoch das Wasser beim letzten Hurrikan George. Der Strand war hier auf unserem Parkplatz. Ein 500 Kilometer langer Küstenstreifen in den Bundesstaaten Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama und Florida ist bedroht. Vor allem viele neu gebaute Apartmentanlagen. Gefährlich nah sind die Ferienhäuser in den letzten Jahren an den Strand gebaut worden, zu nah für einen Hurrikan. Wir werden hart getroffen. Wir wissen noch nicht, ob wir einen Schlag ins Gesicht oder einen Tritt vors Knie bekommen werden, aber es wird wehtun. Aus dem All lässt sich das gewaltige Ausmaß des Hurrikans erkennen. Wie stark die Orkanböen werden, hat ein amerikanischer Fernsehreporter im Windkanal getestet. Schon bei Tempo 150 hält es ihn kaum noch auf den Beinen. Meteorologen erwarten Windgeschwindigkeiten von mehr als 200 Kilometern in der Stunde. Vor allem der Millionenstadt New Orleans droht eine verheerende Flutwelle. Sehr schnell, innerhalb von 10 Stunden, wäre die Innenstadt von New Orleans verwüstet. Alle hoffen nun, dass die Dämme halten und die Pumpensysteme funktionieren. New Orleans liegt 3 Meter unter dem Meeresspiegel und könnte nach einer Sturmflut bis zu 6 Meter hoch unter Wasser stehen. Die Behörden forderten die Menschen auf, sich in Hochhäuser zu flüchten, wie zuletzt vor 6 Jahren bei Hurrikan George. Der schlimmste Wirbelsturm Betsy traf New Orleans 1965. Damals ertranken 75 Menschen in den Fluten.
Und auch Todesfälle in Florida zu beklagen sind. 2. Wir wollen von unserem Korrespondenten Thomas Walde jetzt gerne wissen, wo er im Moment ist und wo auch vor allem der Hurrikan jetzt ist. Thomas Walde, guten Morgen.
Ja, schönen guten Morgen nochmal. Also wir sind kurz vor New Orleans, wir sind am Stadtrand von New Orleans, mussten ein paar Umwege fahren, weil die Polizei hier weiträumig Straßen einfach abgesperrt hat, Highways, also das Ähnliches wie Autobahnen gesperrt hat, dort die Blockaden errichtet hatte, die man nicht umfahren kann einfach. Der Hurricane, so nehmen wir hier immer die Radiomeldungen der Behörden, die das dort minütlich nahezu bekannt geben für die vielen tausend Menschen, die gerade in Notunterkünften sind. Der Hurricane ist an Land gegangen in den letzten Minuten in Mobile, Alabama, das ist ein bisschen östlich von hier. Dort berichten Radioreporter und Behörden durchaus von Schäden. Hier in New Orleans wurden die Stürmungen befürchtet. Es ist windig zwar, aber es gibt erstaunlicherweise sehr wenig Regen. Im Moment, so sagen die Behörden, könnte es so aussehen, als wenn New Orleans mit einem blauen Auge davonkommt. Ganz anders, wie gesagt, in Mobile, Alabama, etwas weiter östlich. Da wird tatsächlich von Schäden berichtet.
Das ist ja auch eine Stadt, in der 100.000 Menschen leben, Hunderttausende leben. Normalerweise sind die denn alle ins Inland gezogen? Haben die sich alle in Sicherheit gebracht?
Die Behörden haben schon in den vergangenen Tagen die Menschen immer wieder aufgefordert, die Gegenden weiträumig zu verlassen. Die Gegenden sind evakuiert worden. Man hat es den ganzen Tag über hier gesehen, dass Autobahnen zum Teil umgedreht wurden, dass also die Gegenspuren auch frei gemacht wurden, damit eben viele tausend Menschen diese Gegend verlassen konnten. Wir haben das gemerkt auf dem Weg auch hierher, entlang der Highways. Die Hotels sind voll, sind Notunterkünfte eingerichtet worden, in Kirchen etwa, in Gemeindezentren. Und wir haben auch gehört und erlebt, dass links und rechts der Autobahn, der Highways, auf den Parkplätzen Menschen in ihren Autos einfach sitzen und sagen, sie werden diese Nacht hier verbringen. Die Behörden sagen inzwischen auch übers Radio, die Menschen sollen bitte geduldig sein und nicht meinen, nur weil doch nicht sofort die ganz schlimmen Schäden in etwa New Orleans eingetreten sind, dass sie schon zurückfahren könnten. Das wird nicht der Fall sein, sondern die Behörden gehen davon aus, dass auch noch an dem nächsten Tag, am Donnerstag, den ganzen Tag über zumindest Hochwassergefahr für New Orleans bestehen wird.
Thomas.
Well, Hal, a very good timing. The eye of the hurricane is literally just arrived on top of us. 15 minutes ago, we had 160-kilometer-an-hour winds right here. Within 15 minutes, it's almost gotten completely calm because we have the eye of Hurricane Ivan above us right now in Gulf Shores, Alabama, which is about 80 kilometers east of the city of Mobile, Alabama. On the eastern side, for those of you who've been to the southern United States, this region of the country, of the Mobile Bay, which is a huge bay that separates Mobile from this part of Alabama, this being Baldwin County. This is where the center of the storm is passing to the east of here in areas like Pensacola, Florida. They may end up being particularly hard hit because it's the eastern side of the storm that is the hardest hit, but we're going to have an estimated 30 minutes of relative calmness. The rain is coming down very softly right now. For 10 hours we've had torrential rain. So this is the first time we've had any let up in the rain. The winds are very light. And seriously, just 15 minutes ago, we couldn't even stand. 30 minutes from now, we expect the winds to come back. And they've had tremendous damage in this area. Behind me, you can't see it because it's dark out right now. This is a parking lot of a hotel that has become basically a rapids, a river. The water is just flowing through. Refuse is just going past us in a river-like setting. The street right nearby where we're standing right now, blocked with heavy trees. The barrier island behind us, Gulf Shores Beach, underwater. 7 hours ago it was flooding, completely evacuated. There are scores of homes that are on stilts on the beach. We have no idea what condition they're on right now because it's too dangerous to go to that barrier island. Even the police and fire officials have evacuated, and they are waiting for the storm to end. One thing we warn everyone, when it comes to hurricanes, when it comes to typhoons, when that eye comes over, there is a feeling of security. People could go out and start cleaning up. Don't do it, because it could get worse on the other end of the storm, and that's what we're prepared to happen in the hours to come. Back to you.
So Gary, you're in the eye of the storm. You're actually right in the middle of this huge weather system that we've been seeing on the satellite maps. Does this mean that in the next few hours the weather system will pick up and winds will get stronger and that area of the country will be swept with more ferocious winds and rain?
Well, exactly. And in less than a few hours, maybe in 30 minutes or 45 minutes, we'll start having those winds pick up when the back end of the storm comes over us. A hurricane is an awesome thing. I've spent some time before flying in the Hurricane Hunter planes, the planes that fly through the hurricane to gauge what the winds are. And when you fly in the air through the eye of the hurricane, it's the most amazing thing. You can't see anything out the windows, and then all of a sudden it's this majesty. You see this complete light. It's like a volcano. You look up and see completely blue sky, and it's just a different feeling now, knowing that that eye that I've seen before in the airplane is above us right now. I mean, I'm looking for stars right now. I don't see them right now, but what you're supposed to see when you're in the middle of the eye, you're supposed to see stars after being for 7 or 8 hours in these ferocious hurricane winds. It's really an amazing part of Mother Nature. We just hope that when daylight comes, we don't hear stories about large numbers of casualties. When it's dark out, the officials can't find out if people have been hurt or killed. For the most part, they have to wait till the next day.
All right, Gary Tuckman, stay safe, reporting to us there from Gulf Shores, Alabama, which is east of Mobile, in the eye of that huge storm system that we're seeing on these satellite maps. Let's go to Jenny Harrison. She's at the World Weather Center, and we're going to be able to see on Jenny's map exactly where Gary Tuckman is. Where is exactly the eye of the storm, if you could point at it so we have an idea where Gary has been speaking to us from, Jenny?
Well, let me just start off, first of all, Hal, by showing us, first of all, this is a rather larger overall view of Hurricane Ivan. In fact, it's probably a little bit more difficult on this particular image to show you the eye. There it is there, that it begins to look, it appears on this system as if it actually fills in. It doesn't, I assure you. I just want to show you here the red box, which will continue to stay very much in effect, of course. This is the tornado watch area over the coming few hours. The areas of yellow are where the most intense areas of rain will continue. The thunderstorms, and of course within there's always the likelihood that we'll see more tornadoes spawned. Now this shows you perhaps more clearly a close-up view of the eye, the whole centre of this hurricane, and in fact Gary Tuckman is just about there. You can see there how those that clearer area beginning to make landfall. It's the outer banks, it's Gulf Shores, Orange Beach. It really is an outer bank where Gary is placed for now, but you can see that obviously we're going to see some now clear weather, some calmer conditions, no rain, no winds, really just very calm winds indeed. But then we have to contend with the back end of this whole system, and in fact this is also when we could see that storm surge as the winds of course continue to swing round, still of course coming in that anti-clockwise direction. The winds beginning to push up more from the south across this whole area, and of course that's also the time as this back end of the system makes landfall up into Mobile through the bay that again the storm surge is a big issue here as well. But of course these rains extending well to the east through Panama City up towards Tallahassee. Again you can see here just in the last few minutes how we've got quite a line of thunderstorms, and again of course always the danger that we'll see those tornadoes spawned. But we'll continue to have more on this of course as we continue. Back to you now, Halle in London.
Bilder, die zeigen, was ein Hurrikan anrichten kann, noch bevor er überhaupt über Land zieht. Umgeknickte Strommasten, die Einsatzkräfte im Dauerstress. Er ist so schnell gewesen, es war wie ich weiß nicht, sagt diese Frau. Niemals zuvor habe ich so etwas gesehen. Das ist wild. Mein Haus ist ein einziges Chaos. Sie ist am Kopf verletzt, alle Scheiben seien in 1000 Stücke zersprungen. Eindrucksvolle Bilder auch aus Pensacola, Florida. Auch hier fegt ein gewaltiger Tornado über die Stadt hinweg. Mittlerweile hat Ivan die US-Golfküste erreicht, peitscht in Alabama, Mississippi, Florida und Louisiana meterhohe Wellen an die Strände. Zwar ist Ivan auf einen Sturm der Kategorie 3 zurückgestuft worden, dennoch erreicht er immer noch Spitzenwerte von 220 Kilometern pro Stunde. Die Schäden sind noch nicht absehbar, doch gerade für Florida ist Ivan verheerend, denn es ist der dritte Hurrikan innerhalb von nur 5 Wochen. Schon Francis und Charlie haben jeweils 10 Milliarden US-Dollar gekostet. Ein Küstenabschnitt 650 Kilometer breit ist betroffen. Über 2 Millionen Menschen sind vor Ivan geflohen. Viele Notquartiere längst überfüllt. Wo soll ich nur mein Baby bekommen, sagt diese Frau, werden meine Wehen durch den Druck früher einsetzen? Ich denke, Erdbeben könnten mir besser gefallen. Ich weiß es noch nicht, ich sage es Ihnen morgen. Auch in den kommenden Tagen dürfte Ivan seinen Raubzug fortsetzen und vor allem im Südosten der USA mit heftigen Stürmen, Regenfällen und Überflutungen Unheil anrichten.
Und jetzt zu seinem Landfall, also zum Anlanden auf der Landfläche sozusagen, hat der Ganze immer noch eine Ausdehnung von knapp 1000 Kilometern. Und die letzten aktuellen Wettermeldungen, die wir von dort gekriegt haben, waren also Spitzenböen bis 157 Kilometer pro Stunde und bis zu 74 Liter Regen auf den Quadratmeter binnen 6 Stunden. Und was wir jetzt haben, das ist eben das klassische Bild. Und dazu gucken wir uns jetzt mal die Partikelvorhersage an, also die Windströmungen, die höchsten Geschwindigkeiten hier mal rot dargestellt. Und wir haben es gesehen, am Anfang waren sie noch sehr, sehr heftig. Aber dann kommt der Landfall, also das Anlanden. Und dann werden die Windgeschwindigkeiten eben deutlich schwächer werden. Was bleibt? Es wird dann immer noch der kräftige Regen sein, mit dem dort die Bevölkerung in den nächsten Tagen sicherlich noch zu kämpfen hat. So viel fürs Erste hier von mir und damit zurück ins Nachrichtenstudio.
Entlang der Golfküste kündigten heftige Regenfälle und meterhohe Wellen das Eintreffen des Hurrikans an. Vor allem in Strandnähe hatten Häuser und Bäume der Wucht von Ivan nichts entgegenzusetzen. Auf Puerto Rico wütet inzwischen Tropensturm Jan, der sich zu einem neuen Hurrikan entwickeln könnte.
Der bereits in der Karibik furchtbare Zerstörungen angerichtet hat, ist der Hurrikan Ivan in der Nacht über den Südosten der USA hereingebrochen. Küstenorte wurden überflutet, Bäume stürzten um, Hunderttausende Menschen waren ohne Strom. In Florida starben durch mehrere von Ivan ausgelöste Tornados 2 Menschen.
Meterhohe Wellen, Sturmböen, Überflutungen. Die ganze Wucht von Hurrikan Ivan traf in den frühen Morgenstunden die Südküste der USA. Winde über 180 Stundenkilometer schnell, sintflutartige Regenfälle. Das Zentrum des Sturms ging in der Nähe der Stadt Mobile an Land und fegt jetzt weiter Richtung Norden. Verwüstungen überall entlang der Golfküste. Allein im Staat Alabama 200.000 Menschen ohne Strom. 500 Kilometer Küste von Louisiana bis nach Florida wurden evakuiert, Millionen Menschen auf der Flucht. Hunderttausende suchten Schutz im Landesinneren oder in Notunterkünften. Ich habe keine Wahl. Ich kann mein Haus bei so einem Sturm nicht schützen. Ich lebe zu nah am Wasser. Da kann ich nicht bleiben. So einen Sturm habe ich noch nie erlebt. Das macht mir schon Angst. Man kann nichts tun. Was geschehen soll, geschieht. Aufatmen dagegen in New Orleans. Die historische Metropole blieb anders als befürchtet von Hurrikan Ivan weitgehend verschont.
Blowing down trees and power lines, more than 1 million people across several Gulf states are still without power. Tornadoes spun off from Ivan, killed 7 people in northwestern Florida before the storm moved ashore. Florida's governor is telling residents not to leave their homes or shelters until they're told it is safe. For more on Ivan, now here's Femi Okey at the International Weather Center.
I believe that this rain here started off the west coast of Africa on September the 2nd. That's when we first saw Ivan as a tropical system. What I'm standing in here right now at the CNN Center in Atlanta, Georgia, is Tropical Storm Ivan, just the outer bands. The wind's picking up, the rain bands can be seen quite clearly. If you take a look at the radar summary, the green colors there indicate regular amounts of rain. More right about the yellows, the oranges, the more vivid colours in there, which tell us that we may well see some tornado watches and warnings through this entire area. Where to next for this tropical storm? Well, up through that northern section of Alabama, heading through Georgia. This is just the beginning of it. It's very breezy right now, to say the least, and it will get a lot worse. And it takes us up through and towards the northeast by the weekend, so still all the way out through that eastern seaboard, seeing a tremendous amount of rainfall from what's left of Tropical Storm Ivan starting out there as a hurricane. Let's cross the Atlantic very swiftly, see if your weather is better than this weather here. Checking out you in that western side of Europe, still looking a little bit unsettled, particularly for Norway and Sweden, and also seeing some rain extending up towards that western side of Russia. As far as your temperatures are concerned, that central part of Europe doing pretty well, but behind any of your weather fronts, do expect some somewhat cooler temperatures. That wraps up your world weather on location for now, and don't forget to check cnn.com/weather. 5-day forecast for more than 10,000 cities. I'm Femi Okey reporting from the CNN Center in Tropical Storm Ivan.
And we'll take you to the eastern Pacific, where we are still watching what used to be Hurricane Javier. You can see the clouds right here, not quite making landfall over the Baja Peninsula, but we expect that into the next 12 to 24 hours. But the good news is it has weakened. It is now a tropical storm, a pretty strong one, winds over 100 kilometers per hour, as you can tell here, 112 kilometers per hour with higher gusts, and still moving north at 12 kilometers per hour. So we do expect the system to continue to push across the area and make landfall sometimes on late Saturday, early Sunday, and we do have tropical storm warnings and watches issued for the southern and central parts of the Baja Peninsula, and you can see by Monday it will be inland. So still some rough seas out there and some pretty wet and windy weather conditions. Meanwhile, the remnants of what used to be Hurricane Ivan are still affecting the northeastern part of the United States. You can see the clouds here and the rainfall with our radar pictures. So some heavy rainfall is still expected through the Ohio Valley, anywhere from Pennsylvania and all the way into Maine and New Hampshire, and we're going to continue to see also the chance of a few severe thunderstorms. We've seen a tornado the past couple of days, particularly around Virginia, but the system will remain pretty much active, the remnants of it, and unfortunately we'll see more rain and more flooding in some areas. We also are still watching Tropical Storm Jean affecting the western parts of Hispaniola. We do have tropical storm warning and watches issued for the southeastern Bahamas and also central areas of Bahamas. The good news is that Jean is not expected to become a hurricane. Conditions are not favorable for it to do that right now. We'll keep you posted. Let's have a look at more city forecast.
Es war der schlimmste Wirbelsturm der vergangenen 5 Jahre. Insgesamt starben durch Hurrikan Ivan in den USA fast 40 Menschen. Insgesamt waren es auf seinem Zug durch die Karibik über 100 Tote. Inzwischen zieht Ivan als tropischer Sturm Richtung Nordosten der USA und bringt gewaltige Regenmengen mit sich. In Florida und Alabama kehren die ersten Menschen in ihre zerstörten Häuser zurück. Aus den USA berichtet Gesa Eberl.
Der Hurrikan ist abgezogen, doch damit ist es nicht überstanden. Mehrere Tornados zogen im Gefolge des Wirbelsturms durch die Südstaaten der USA. Die ohnehin schon katastrophale Bilanz wurde damit noch schlimmer. In die Trümmer, die die Naturgewalten hinterlassen haben, kehren jetzt die ersten Bewohner zurück. Sie sind schockiert. Von ihren Häusern ist fast nichts mehr übrig, nur noch einige Möbel sind wiederzuerkennen. Wir haben alles verloren, aber wenigstens haben wir uns gegenseitig. Und wissen Sie, hoffentlich ist niemand verletzt oder tot. Es ist einfach sehr hart. Bei der Nachbarin sieht es nicht besser aus. Es ist wie nach dem Krieg, sagt sie, als hätte jemand eine Bombe abgeworfen und wir müssen jetzt die Trümmer zusammensuchen. Fast 2 Millionen Menschen sind auch jetzt, wo Ivan langsam abzieht, in 6 Bundesstaaten ohne Stromversorgung. Die Nationalgarde ist mit Lastwagenkonvois auf dem Weg in die Krisengebiete, um die Menschen mit Lebensmitteln und Wasser zu versorgen. Es bricht einem das Herz, diese Verwüstung hier anzusehen. Aus der Luft konnten wir die physikalische Kraft sehen, mit der Ivan gewütet hat. Im Nachbarstaat Alabama suchen Sicherheitskräfte am Strand von Orange Beach mit Spürhunden die Trümmer ab. Wir versuchen nach wie vor Menschen zu finden, die hier eingeschlossen sind. Von den Ferienanlagen sind nur noch Bretterhaufen übrig. Der Gouverneur von Alabama, Bob Riley, sagt, bei seinem Flug, es sei das erste Mal, dass er so etwas erlebe. Die Versicherungen schätzen die Schäden in Florida, Alabama und weiteren US-Staaten auf 2 bis 10 Milliarden $. In einigen Orten wird damit gerechnet, dass die Schäden frühestens Ende Mai nächsten Jahres behoben werden können.
Auf den Atlantik zurzeit gibt es dort 2 Stürme, 2 tropische Stürme. Das ist einmal Jan und hat eine Höchstgeschwindigkeit von 75 Kilometer in der Stunde, zieht weiter in nordwestliche Richtung. Und ob er sich noch mal verstärkt, das ist noch nicht ganz klar. Der zweite ist ein Hurrikan bereits, hat wesentlich höhere Windgeschwindigkeiten, liegt aber eben weit draußen auf dem Atlantik und zieht erstmal in nordwestliche Richtungen. Das war es dann erstmal vom Wetter. Ich wünsche Ihnen noch einen schönen Abend.
Hello to you again, Shihab. I have some fairly good news, I think, really, with regards to Tropical Storm Jean. It is still out there and it's still a tropical storm, but it continues to move up towards the north, and that does mean it really is taking it away from the Bahamas. Now, you can see on the satellite, it's quite a disarranged little area of cloud, and in fact, it's actually moving fairly erratically up towards the north. But because it's so disorganized, it actually means that it may well not strengthen very much over the next 24 hours. Although it's moving erratically to the north, it does mean that it's, as I say, moving away from the Bahamas. It's moving a little bit quicker now at about 11 kilometres an hour. Those winds still sustained at about 75 kilometres an hour.
Welcome back. Well, you still can't book a flight to the moon or take a weekend cruise to Mars. Space tourism is very much alive. Miles O'Brien introduces us to one entrepreneur who has big dreams and, more importantly, paying customers.
After years of hard work, Peter Diamandis is seeing some big dreams take flight. With newly minted blessings from the FAA, the company he heads, Zero G Corporation, is now peddling trips aboard a modified, well-padded 727 that flies a roller coaster pattern, offering brief spurts of weightlessness for a couple of dozen hardy souls.
Are you making money or are you just having fun? We're both. You can do both. Yeah. Get ready, straightforward.
It's a right stuff moment for the rest of us, for about $3,000.
When Diamandis did his business plan, he figured there'd be about 2 flights booked in the first month. So far, he's got 20.
Diamandis believes there are tens of thousands of people who would pay for the chance to moonwalk, tumble, spin, and in some cases, lose breakfast this way. But for Diamandis, these flights are just a small piece of a puzzle as big as the stars. A puzzle he spent most of his life trying to solve. How to open up the high frontier to entrepreneurs.
My whole reason for being right now is to make the engine not the government, but economics.
profitable business.
And that is what led him to create the Ansari X Prize nearly 10 years ago. It's a $10 million privately funded purse for the first civilian team to fly a 3-seat vehicle to space and back twice in as many weeks. Over the years, a few dozen teams joined the competition with varying degrees of success.
We need a new generation, and that's only going to come when there's enough profit being made that there is drive, there's competition. We need enough of the cooperation stuff. Let's get some good old competition to drive us up there.
It's going to take decades for this industry to develop.
Dennis Tito is the world's first space tourist. 3.5 years ago, he paid the Russians $20 million to visit the International Space Station. Since then, only one other space tourist has floated in his wake. Tito is now focused on the earthly concerns of his investment company. Is he bullish on space as a business?
Well, it's a sector that I'd be bullish on 50 or 100 years from now.
It's a long way from weightless flights and suborbital hops to a Hilton on the moon, but Diamandis says his embryonic industry is headed in the right direction. Miles O'Brien, CNN, New York.
Well, and then maybe just, one of the first people off the line. I'm doing what we did yesterday. We were starting to feedback some of the stuff. We're doing a mixture of activities over here, basically. Anyone seen the facility yet, but we just removed everything and brought it over here. Set up a couple of different operations. It was a very dry operation. There's not a lot of lubricants or anything like that. And so immediately all of the equipment was doused in oil. So over the last week we've been disassembling some. Yesterday on the PCS we've lost one piece of paper we can't find. PCS? Thermal control system. Yeah. We had a crew of people last week dig through fiberglass here. Set up a big team of people to go pick through all of this stuff, tooling, and the recovery rate has been huge. Coming to walk down Thursday. We're going to start. This is Kevin Harrison, who's the man in charge of all of this. And we got people from Houston and California coming Thursday to facility walk down and last week we had all of these things down to the component pieces, and every piece was cleaned and reassembled. Get the pieces all over the world. All developed from the parachute refurb. Yeah, the parachute refurbishment facility. They sent 3 technicians out. Well, you don't expect that to fix every single one in a week. I was just saying, that's just amazing. Rebuild it. I just can't believe it's all this stuff's been completely rebuilt. This is the maker was in the other building. I mean, there was one part we were desperately looking for. It was a chin gap paper to replace. Oh, okay. So those are the only ones that really. And Hampton's story was more. I don't all those things. You want to know where that stuff is. But under the these 9710s, and obviously then I got the stuff running over there, so we're doing what we can. Blankets and the materials that we work with upstairs, so they're all, it also be at some time of the sections anyway, but within the room in the controlled quality area. When we make new blankets, we look at the old ones, the recoverable hardware, and things like that. In the hurricane prep, we have hundreds, at least 80 blankets and planes that weren't double bagged and double bagged before just ready to go right back. You know, all I did was we got an email from the staff. There was a people until somebody directed us. Well, I'll tell you what, when I see it. Hi, how are you? Nice to see you, sir. Good to be here. Let me see. What's the seating capacity? Well, we can put some seats. One, we put Mr. O'Keefe and Mr. Reedy on the 2 outside, 4 facing seats. Those are the 2 best views. Okay. And then,
So that's where the folks actually go up to the orbiter, and they have a camera that they have to work through, and they foam in a pattern using some of these gun stock machines. So it's a purely manual effort. The craftsman type effort. That's the arm of it. These programmers do a 3D rendering. Several of them are virtually untouched.
What's their target mark? Once you move back in here, you want that's to do this way. I know they'll work with us to try and do minimum. He's rooting for no.
We've pressed it so far.
Oh my God. You know, we need to get ahead of the game and figure out next time before it happens, how do you react to next time? You know, what exactly are the logistics?
Well, they picked September 11th.